All right, welcome. This is Orion Rising. I am your host, Leonard O'Neill. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good morrow, depending on where in the world you are tuning into the show. Show this out, show this out, show this out. All right, welcome. So I wasn't able to share this in a bunch of places because I was trying to, and it always is slow, of course. So I got it shared out to a couple of places. Please share this out on Facebook. For those of you that are here, I can see Penny's in the audience. She said hello. Rick, you're talking in the audience. So I see a couple of you that are speaking, so I know you're here. Okay. Oh, let me turn off this overlay here now that I'm sitting here on the chat instead of being here. Let me turn off the overlay and put myself up into full screen, and we'll get started here, right? So yeah, make sure you share this out for me, guys. Thank you. I didn't have time. I was talking at the moment just before being live. I was actually working with somebody on Messenger and talking. So I looked up and was like, "Oh, I'm going to be late. I got to go live." Because I knew I was going to go live, but I was too busy typing. Okay. So we finished that session last week, and I noticed that like the next three sessions are only like 7 to 10 questions long. So we might end up getting through a couple of sessions a week for the next couple of weeks just to get, which is good, right? Because sometimes it takes me, 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get through one session because we do a lot of talking. Thank you, Rick. I saw that somebody was trying to share, so thank you. So, all right, Penny said off my game this week. I couldn't make it 3 weeks in a row. Well, you're here. So you're here when you're supposed to be. There's nobody required to be anywhere. That's just like in the groups that I have where I have administrators. They're not required to be on at any specific time. They're not required to be on for any specific time. They're not required to do anything. I never, even with readers in the couple of the groups where we do readings, when we're helping train people, if you work with us, you know that. We don't force you to do anything you don't want to do or any time. And then we don't tell you that you can't go and do it on your own. Once you feel comfortable, you can take off and never talk to us again. We don't care. We're here to expand the consciousness of people and show them that everybody can have every single skill, whatever the skill set is that you've ever even heard of, that you know is legit and other people have. You can have it as well. You can have all of them. It just takes time to do that. And some skills you brought with you, or the possibility of using certain skills. Some people come through as a healer. I was a natural born healer. So was both of my ex-wives, natural born healers. And two of us are Reiki master teachers now because of that. And when we were being attuned to our master teacher attunement, the people who were attuning us were like, what we should be having you attune us because of the crazy stuff that was going on. In fact, I had my teacher who was in Australia. In fact, my ex-wife did the same thing. She was already a master teacher, but she went through the process just like I did, because there was a lot of people questioning back in, I think it was 2016 or so, about doing distance healing. And those of us who were in the industry for years were like, there should be nothing that has anything to do with distance. Shouldn't matter. If you can astral project to the other side of the planet to see what's going on, why wouldn't we be able to heal too? So a lot of people that were old school Reiki masters were like, no, you have to be hands-on in the person's presence to be able to tune them. And there was a bunch of us that were like, no, as we develop and we're developing beyond this, this whole, how far backwards we were as a species on this earth for the last couple thousand years, more than that really, but just, to not scare people, that we should be opening up our minds as we're progressing and ascending into the possibility in the realm of non-physical. So there shouldn't be anything to that. So I decided I'm going to go and get, Reiki attunements from somebody, wherever they are in the world, that it's not here. And it just turned out that this person was literally in Australia and I'm in California. So, so that's one way all the way around the world. And the other way, it's still, down, 4,000 or 5,000 miles away. Out in the Pacific, it may not be 5,000 miles away, but it's at least a couple thousand miles away down to Australia from California. And I had, then being a scientist, when I was getting my attunement for master teacher, I made sure to not really figure out when because of the time differential. Because those of you who are in Australia, Rick, you know what I'm talking about. You guys are like 16 hours ahead of us or 17 hours ahead of us, depending on whether you're in the area that does the time change or if you do or not. And we're here and we do time changes forward and backwards. We just sprung forward not too long ago. So we did the time change. That drives me crazy. I wish we'd stop. I lived in Arizona where we didn't do it. So much better. You just have to get used to the idea that it stays light until 10 o'clock. Who cares? Right? Especially if you're in the further north you go, the longer it stays light in the wintertime. So literally, I wasn't sure when I was supposed to have my attunement. And then the experience that I had when it happened was crazy. And I was reading what Penny just posted, and I literally was like, "What is going on? Oh my!" Like it was heat. My face turned red. I was hot. My hands were glowing, and I was like, "Maybe I wonder when my attunement was supposed to be because wow, this is crazy." And it was on a Sunday, so I was like, "Wow, this is really strange." So I emailed. Literally, when it stopped, I emailed my master in Australia, and she emailed me back with, "We just finished with you." And I was like, okay, because let me tell you what just happened here and how I felt and what was happening to me. I felt that, and I didn't even know. I had no expectations because I didn't know exactly when the time differential would be. So I didn't figure it out because I wanted to have it happen, hopefully while I was awake and not while I was asleep. And it just so turned out that it just happened. And then she said, "Let me explain to you what happened here." Oh my, you must be a healer already. How long have you been healing people? And I said, well, I've taken all your courses in the last few months to get my attunements, but I've been doing this for 30 years. And she was like, "You are a natural healer because you are already a master. You must have brought that with you." And I was like, okay. And then when she told me what was going on, which was really insane, right? There's Peter. Welcome, Peter. Denise, welcome. Denise. Brianna, welcome. If you say something in the chat, I know you're here. Please share this out, right? So, right, Penny said that's what I was trying to read when I was talking. She said, right, yeah, so it's 8:07 now in Australia where Rick is, and it's 3:09 now because it took me a couple minutes to read it until, so yeah, literally, see, so that's how far ahead you are than me. It's 3 p.m., 3:09, almost 3:10 p.m. here right now currently in California. And you're tomorrow in the future in the morning. Getting up, just woke up a little while ago, right? So for you, it's Saturday morning. For me, it's Friday afternoon. It's not even evening yet here in the United States. It is in the East Coast because they're 7 o'clock in the evening now, p.m. So you're just on the other side of the prime meridian. So you're literally that far ahead of us. So that's why I always say good morning, good afternoon, or good, or good morrow, not good evening. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good morrow. I always say that on the outside of my show. Okay, so the point of all of this is that she was in Australia. I'm over here. I didn't have any expectations. I didn't know when it was going to be, and I had this intense rush of warmth and heat, and literally flushed, and my hands were almost glowing red at the time. And that was a distance attunement. So then I went back to people who were the opposite minded and gave them my assessment of what was going on. So my ex-wife, who we're still friends and still talk, she said, "I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go through it and pay for it as well to see how it feels." And so she did the same thing, got her Reiki 1, 2, and 3, and the master teacher attunement. And then we talked about it and then presented it to these people who were the Puritans who said, "No, you can't have that." And they still, some of them, the older ones, still resist. They're closed-minded about the idea of ascension, obviously, and the expansion of the possibility to a hive mind complex and going outside of the physical plane to have things get done. And so people ask me that, what do you do about those people? It's just like when I was going to the Scottish Games, the Celtic Highland Games out here in the United States. They've been going on for hundreds of years around the world. If you're in England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, America, Canada, or a few other places around the world, you know what I'm talking about. ESPN used to put it on over here in the United States and film. I was there a few times when they were filming, out here in California, put on by the Caledonia Club, which is the largest club like the United Nations for the Irish, English, Scottish, Welsh DNA and their clans around the world. I was a member of that for a while. I had been sponsored into that and was a member of the Caledonia Club here in San Francisco, where they're based for the North American continent when I was in my 20s. And when I was going there, there was a lot of us that were, would not buy the traditional kilts, which cost even at that time. So we're talking about, I'm in my 50s now. So we're talking 30 years ago, they were already $1,000 30 years ago. So now they're probably $5,000 or more for a traditional wool kilt with your family tartan on it. So some of us didn't have that kind of money. So we were buying these other kilts that cost less, that they didn't approve of. The Puritans were saying, that we were not traditional because it wasn't full traditional dress. And some of us were like, I get that. And if we were doing a military tattoo or in a pipe band, I get that it should be traditional. But if we're not, and we're just here to represent the clans and walk around and do all the things that we're doing, I think that it should be okay for people not to wear a tradition, have to spend the money. People are not that rich where they can just buy $1,000 worth of a kilt or get one specifically made. Those are very expensive. And the Puritans really got annoyed with that. But some of the people in the Caledonia Club were like, listen, that people don't have that kind of money. You could get I forgot what it was called, because there was a Utilikilt, that company, and I had a couple of those. But that wasn't what literally those were. They usually didn't do a lot of tartans. They probably are now doing that. And those were still like $350 to $500, like buying a leather jacket in the United States. But there was another company that would only cost you about $60 or $70, and that one had a fly. You pulled it closed, and it had a Velcro, and you would stick the Velcro at your waist, and then that's all you had to do. So you could just take it off, put it on, and that drove the Puritans crazy. But they did them in tartan, literally clan tartan. So you could get your clan tartan, but only have to pay, and it was done in cotton instead of wool. But it looked very authentic, and you could get the right length that you needed by measuring, and that drove the Puritans crazy, because if you didn't have a shirt go over the top of it, you could see their emblem that they put on the waistband, and that drove the Puritans crazy. But that only lasted for about 3 to 4 years, and after that, that's basically because most people in the United States or in the North American continent were not rich enough to buy one of those kilts for $1,000, and that was 30 years ago. So now, 30 years later, it's got to be $4,000 or $5,000 for the same kilt. So people just started wearing them, and it drove them crazy. But the number of those people got less and less and less very quickly over time as those got more popular. And then Utilikilts too. And I was working in Berkeley when I was about 35 years old, Berkeley, California, and I was running a frame shop in Berkeley. And this guy would walk by every day who was worked and owned another shop. It wasn't a frame shop, but it was I forget what it was. I think it was a head shop. That's what we call them over here in the United States, where they sell, like bongs and pipes and tobacco and cigarettes and all that kinds of stuff. Now they sell CBDs and marijuana and stuff like that. And he would always walk by coming from the train station, which I came in on the train as well. But he came walking by after I was already at work and open. And I would see him walk by wearing combat boots and a utility kilt and dressed, and sometimes with a t-shirt. And I actually helped him. We started talking one day, and I told him that I can't wear that to work because I'm the store manager, but I wear my utility kilts around all the time with combat boots and the whole nines. It turned out his theme was that he was doing for his wedding was a Star Wars theme, and they wanted to design. He wanted to design the Red Guard, who, I don't know if you ever remember watching Star Wars. They were always protecting the Sith Lord, and they were all in that red outfit that looked like it was leather, or I think when they made it, it wasn't leather. I think it was made out of acrylic or plastic. And he was trying to figure that out. And I actually helped him design his entire wedding because we were friends. But my point is, he agreed that these traditionalists really hate when they see us. The same thing goes for people casting spells and doing things where they, traditionally in these old world religions. Now, remember, I am a Merlin. I have that title. So 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, even hundreds of years ago, a couple hundred years ago, everything was very ritualistic, and you would have to do things. If you've ever read like the Necronomicon, there's a couple versions of it where they have ancient spells from Mesopotamia area. In fact, they even talk about the Mesopotamian Aluma Elish in one of the versions. And it takes like 6 months to cast this spell. You got to do all this stuff. And that is the way traditionalists, and I had to combat that from all these guilds and covens here in the United States, where they, with their book of secrets, they would say you have to start the spell on the new moon, and it takes 2 or 3 months to do it, and you have to do it at a certain time because this spell has to be done on October 31st during the full moon closest to October, and all of this. And I spent a lot of time in these paranormal shops throughout the years teaching people the opposite, that some of those you do need that stuff, and that tradition is important for specific things that you need that for, but you're supposed to be evolving to know. And this is what we were teaching when it came to casting circles and using the altar and the tools, that eventually we start you with, you need all the tools, because people think that if I have something like a pair of glasses, I can't read until I put my glasses on. I also can't communicate with somebody or eat food without a fork and a knife. So why would they think that they could cast spells without having a wand or a staff or a dagger or something? So we knew this, and that was the way it was taught traditionally. So we would teach people in the beginning that you need these things until you don't. And the transition from magic to high magic, magic with a K, what would be a place where you would stop needing physical things. And we were teaching that. And then I used to go and teach on like a Wednesday. I think I was doing it on a Tuesday or Wednesday for many years with my Reiki master teacher, not the one in Australia, but the one my first one, who was here in the United States. And we would meet and we were teaching people how to instantly cast spells, and that you can cast hundreds of them in one day if you're actually knowing what you're doing. And so we would teach people, and I still do this. I'll teach you how to write out an entire spell that could be a paragraph, 2 paragraphs long, and then you memorize that spell, and then we teach you how to create that entire spell in very few words, 1 or 2 words, or 1 word, or just a quick sentence. And that sentence or word is an intention of all of this that you already have in your head because you wrote it. And that you know when you're doing that this entire scenario is what you're saying in that one message, so that you can then instantly cast these long drawn out spells. And we were evolving throughout the time and teaching this to people. And the Puritans, again, were having a conniption about how dare you do that. And anyone who knows anything about ascension knows that the physical plane, this is my whole point, you'll see where I'm going with it, right? The physical plane is here to teach you what you need to know in this physical place until you start ascending. And when you start ascending past this place, you're supposed to realize the message that Neo got from the little boy when he was moving and bending the spoon. And he said, you have to teach me how you do that. And he said, you need to be the spoon. That whole entire message in that movie was, you have to become the spoon. It's not your will bending the spoon. You are transcending from who you are to the outside of this space-time, outside of this place of time, into the place of from the dimension to the density, and becoming, and talk to the spoon and become the spoon and move. So you're expanding your consciousness past this physical plane. And this is what we're all supposed to be doing here. We're supposed to, when we're first locked into this puzzle, we're first locked into this prison of the mind, it's all physical, and we learn all of the physical. And what we're supposed to do is choose to either stay in the physical and be self-serving, or start to ascend past that and know that the ultimate game here is to move into a place that eventually replaces this physical body and you start becoming aware of yourself in the spiritual, and you start moving into that. In the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth, pretty soon you don't have a physical body anymore, and you are only energy. That is what we're supposed to do here. So my whole point of all of this, then we'll get into Raw. I know that I'm going on for 20 minutes or so again before I even start Raw, but you'll see where we're going because Raw is going to cover this. You'll see that. So literally what you're supposed to be doing is ascending to the possibility of everything outside of this place, because you're trying to. This is a classroom. This is a school for the this is what Raw is telling you, and what has happened here. Raw is telling you this. The overtone message is they learned about this. Evil people learned about what this place is about, and they learned that they can usurp. That means get around and take control of this matrix by taking control of your free will without you knowing about it. And that's what they've done here. That is literally what you know as the Anunnaki, or whatever you call them in whatever country that you're in, whatever you know them as, the Illuminati, the Bilderberger, whatever fear factor pops up in your mind of the great evils of the earth, the 1%ers, they know about that. They know. And so what they've done is the information that came here, that them controlling your pineal gland, that pine cone in the one hand, and the scrolls in the waistband and the little handbag, is literally what Ra's talking about. When they got here, the Orion Crusaders got here, the information that they brought was, this is how you control all of this. And that's what they've done. What we're trying to attempt to do here is remind you that you have free will, that you are something greater than this physical plane, and that there is this entire other place that's there. So all of the religions of the earth used to teach that. And there was a definitive line in time where that all changed. And that is as far back in time, or the other way around, however you want to look at it, as far back in time as the Orion Crusaders, the Anunnaki, could go and change time. Because when they got here, you have to have a past, a present, and a future. So for them to have boots on the ground, they had access to the timeline. That's the temporal war. You can Google that. That's the temporal war. So they had access to the timeline, and what they did was they projected themselves backwards in time and started making changes to the timeline, which eradicated your knowledge of the existence of free will and everything that you're supposed to learn. And as we have come forward in time, if you look, they took it all away and didn't teach it, and then they've been trying to eradicate it as it pops up throughout all of time. They're still trying to do it now. Every time people like myself start teaching it, back 1,000 years ago and 500 years ago, they would have already whacked me. They would have already killed me for doing this and saying what I'm saying. They can't do that anymore because there's actually more souls on this earth currently in human flesh, in human bodies, that came here to help than there are indigenous life forms that these evil people are trying to control. Okay. More than 68% of the population of this earth did not originate here. Of that 68% of the population of the earth, there's 75% of that population that is on this planet came here to help. So the overwhelming majority of the souls here have now changed the dynamic of the way things are going, because it's time. The people who were the Orion Crusaders, who got here and got boots on the ground, left shortly after. They weren't even here for 100 years. Okay, they were here for a very short period of time, and they left already. And they moved on, but they left in their wake the controlling mechanism, which was being controlled by the people. They said, you will be the warlord of all of Greece. All you have to do is bow, kneel, and give me earth and water. And just like they said it wasn't literally that, but I use that analogy because that's what Xerxes sent his emissary to say to Leonidas in Sparta. And Leonidas threw his ass down a well, killed him, sent back his skull, and that was his answer. And then he marched out, and you guys know the rest of the story. And if you don't, you should look up the Battle of Thermopylae. And that's the 300, or watch the movie, which is done from a comic book, but it's from what did they call that? In any case, it's very close to reality and history. They just put it in a comic book form and then film the movie, and then film the second movie, which was what was going on in the water that most people never learned about in that part of the war, which was going on by the Athenians, who came over fighting to cut off Xerxes, while on land the Greeks were doing that and keeping them from refortifying as much as they could, and then all of Greece united, and then ended up, we know the history of that. And if you don't, you should look up that history. The Greeks took over the known world at the time. Okay, so please, like I said, share this out. Okay, so Denise had a question. I will go back and look at that. Is it bad to cast spells for something that you want? Yes and no. You have to be careful if that's the question. If there's another question, Denise, please ask that in the chat and I'll answer that. But I'll answer the one that's right above what Pamela said. It depends. If you're putting out information to the universe for you and it doesn't affect any other person's free will, it's a good question, because that has to do with the laws of the universe, the law of one, and free will. If it doesn't infringe free will of another person, then there's not going to be any negative connotations to what you do. Anything that you put out for yourself, I want this or I want that, I'm trying to attract money or I'm trying to attract, but you also have to be very specific about how you go about that, because the universe works on ideas and concepts. So if you say, I want money, but you're not specifying how that money is supposed to come to you, the universe is going to start feeding you ways to make money, but you may have to work your ass off to get it. So doors are going to open up. And if you don't see them, or you're like, yeah, I want money, but I just want to win the lottery, I want to be lazy and sit on my ass, and I want to get rich. And the universe is going to go, well, that's going to go down on the list, because everyone that knows about the lottery anywhere on the face of the earth, they all have lotteries. They're all thinking the same thing. So you're going to go further down on the list, and it may never happen. So if you're just trying to attract money to yourself, then the opportunity is going to arise, but it's not going to be free. Nothing is free in the place of doing. So it's not bad if your intention is not to change someone else's free will. That's why when people are like, I'm going to do a love spell and cast it on that person, then we teach you how the ramifications of that are going to be negative against you. Do what thou wilt, but harm none is the ancient practice. And then if you're a Satanist, they took that and morphed it and took off the last part and just said, do what thou wilt. Okay. So do what thou wilt, but harm none. So anything that you're doing cannot infringe people of free will. And so that's how what they're doing is they've learned how to get around that free will by proxy. So what they do is they just take away the knowledge of free will from you. They're not, and it's still there, but they don't let you see it outright. Okay. So for instance, here in the United States, they no longer teach things to children, which they used to teach to everybody: civics classes, economics classes, social economic classes, and geopolitical classes. They don't teach those growing up at all, but they have them in college, and they don't require you to take any of those classes, but they're there if you want to learn them. Business classes and things like that, they're there, but you have to go in and say, I want to take this class. If you don't even know they exist unless you inquire. Why is that? Because the 1% doesn't want anyone to be their rival in any way or competition. So it's there if you go and look for it. So they're not taking it out of everything, but they're not doing you any favors by saying you need to learn how to do these things to survive on this planet. You need to know how to write checks. You need to know how to balance checkbooks. You need to know how to balance your bank account and how to spend money and how to make a ledger and make up all these things of this is how my expenditures, and this is how much money I have, and this is how much money that I can spend or need to spend. And so there's people like myself who get paid money to teach these things that were basic for kids 50 years ago, 100 years ago in this country. And I'm sure it's in your country. If you're in Ireland, you know what I'm talking about. They don't even teach you your native language in Ireland currently. There are more people around the world that speak Irish than there are in the country of Ireland who speak it, because they don't teach it, especially if you're in the north. You don't get, it's there. If you want to learn it, you can. It's on the Duolingo app. You can buy it from Rosetta Stone, but they've taken it out of, we're not doing you any favors. When I was a kid, you were taught either Spanish or French, and you got to choose which one that you were to learn. Because I live in California, we have so many people that are, have a border with Mexico. I started learning Spanish. I'm teaching myself now Spanish and French and German and 25 languages, not a joke. So I'm trying to learn all of them. before I end this life, I'm going to learn, because I know that I already know them. I'm just trying to remember them. It's taken me a long time to learn how to spell them in every language. That's taken me far longer than I can mimic languages and pick them up very quickly. So if I talk to people, I pick up language and ask questions, and I'm really good at that, and accents and things like that as well. So I'm really good at that, but it's trying to figure out how to spell. Writing, because of what they did to English, has never been my forte. English is like the most hideous language to try and learn how to spell, because they designed it so that poor people had no idea how to write things properly, so the rich people could say and separate themselves. And the same thing with talking. But my father taught me how to speak like an aristocrat, because my family's royalty. So he was like, you need to learn this part. But my father was never really good at spelling either. So spelling has never been a strong suit for most of the people on my father's side of the family, because you don't need that when you're communicating with words as much as you do if you have to write things out. Okay. So the point of all of this is that the Orion Crusaders have just got around your free will by, first of all, not letting you know you have free will. Secondly, taking away anything that would advantage you and give you equal footing against what they want and what they are controlling. So if you want to get rich, you got to look at rich people and go, what did they do to get rich? If you ask yourself that and research it, then you go, well, they went to all these business classes and took all these courses. If you do that, you will become rich, because that's how they became rich. That's how all rich people become rich. That's why they tell you, if you want to get rich, you got to start hanging out with rich people. If you want to be a politician, you got to start hanging out with politicians. Why? Because you see, they talk to you. They start telling you things. They start giving you secrets. You just have to pay attention. That's why we say this, and we try to teach you guys this. When someone tells you who they are, listen to them. Okay? Because they will. Arrogance is one of the biggest, gluttony, arrogance, hubris is the biggest three problems of people that are in service to self. It is, in fact, what defines them more than anything else, is their ego. So all you have to do is pay attention to their words and how they say things, and the look in their eyes and the look on their face when they speak. And if they know that you're paying attention, they will change that. If they don't know, and you're acting stupid or playing as if you're under their spell, you're going to get information far more readily. We teach this in spycraft. Okay. So you need to look stupid. I'm not stupid. I just play a stupid person on television. Okay. So I hope that was the question that you had. Okay. So let me put my glasses on so I can check. Joanna, welcome. I don't know if I said hello to you. If I'm missing anyone, I apologize. So you have to realize that, right? Pamela said exactly. I don't know a word of Irish, and I was taught French. Yeah. See, so there you go. You don't know a word of Irish, and so it depends on whether your family members taught you Irish. My family members were teaching me that, and I'm now teaching myself the Irish language as well as the Scottish language, which is just a dialect differentiated from Scotland or from Ireland. And both of those are a dialect of Welsh. And if you listen to the Welsh, they have the original language. And, you know, the Scots say they do and the Irish say they do, but the Scots were only there because the Irish, right? And so who came first, the chicken or the egg? Was Wales a country before Ireland was a country? If you trace it back, I believe it was because because getting on the islands of Ireland and Scotland, we all know, if you're Irish, you know that there were two separate invasions. So that means that we came from the mainland of Europe and the west coast of Europe. And then you can trace most Irish DNA back to Spain. So we came out of the west coast of Spain at some point. And anybody who has Rh negative factor, or specifically typo or typo negative DNA, that traces back to the west coast of Spain, to one particular city that used to be a city-state in Spain that is only 10,000 years old. So the truth is, we came from, that's why when people say Celts, the Celtic race, the Vikings that were Western and Southern Europeans, that's where we descended from. So the truth is that Wales maybe really was a country prior to Ireland being occupied by the current DNA that occupies it. But then the English don't want to hear that, because that would suggest the same thing about the English, that they also came from the mainland. And they don't want that because the French and the Germans and the Welsh claim that they've been around longer than England. And the English, of course, believe they own the planet. Right? Okay. So the purpose of all this is that Ra is telling you that the evil people learned how this matrix worked. I apologize. I'm having allergy issues because it's for spring here in the United States, and right now the trees are blooming, and I'm literally living in a place that's called Heritage Oaks, and we have oak trees everywhere, heritage oaks all around us, encompassing us with a canopy of their branches. And that the pollen from the trees is really heavy until about 2.5, 3 weeks from now. And then there'll be the grasses. And when the grasses, it's not bad because there's not a lot of grass. There is, but not like the trees, the heritage oaks. We have oak trees blooming everywhere. And it literally puts a coating of yellow from the pollen all over the windows and windshields of our vehicles. That's how much so I'm having issues with. I took allergy medicine this morning, so I apologize. But the modus operandi of the Orion Crusaders and all people in the third dimension who are in service to self is to usurp control over things by erasing it from you, taking it away from you. But they have to leave it up there because of free will. They have to leave it out there and teach it and leave the information out there. So if you're looking for it, you can find it. It's just like what they did with the religions. It's all, I explain that and talk about that in my book, which will be coming out in the next 90 days. We're hoping maybe a little bit more than that. I just got done with the editing process last week and sent it back. And I just heard from the publisher that they thanked me for sending it back, and that shortly I will have another person contacting me to start designing on the cover and all of that stuff to put it to print. And get it out. So we're going to get it to print. I'll let you guys know what's going on with that when that comes out and when the pre-ordering process starts. Once we get the book starting to go to print, then we will roll out the website and the pre-ordering process for the book so that those of you who are out there around the world who want to order the book, pre-order it so you don't have to worry about it when it drops. To run out to a bookstore and have it mailed to you, you can do just that. Or pre-order it on like Kindle, and I'm working on a deal for the ebook for the audio book and to get that published as well. So we'll have the ebook out and the audio book and all of that. And so I'll let you know as soon as that is up, I'll be promoting that. Okay. So, and the book is literally entitled The Reality About Reality Returning to the Old Ways, which is, it tells about all of this. Okay. That's funny because Denise just said that, and I didn't know that. She said, Leo, please let us know about the book. We want first dibs. No, I will. As soon as we get the website up, I will be promoting that. And as soon as we have a pre-order tab on the website, that'll be, I'll let you guys all know about that so that you guys, anyone who wants to buy the book will be able to have access to pre-ordering. And as soon as it rolls out to the world, your book will be put in the mail. And I don't know if you guys will get it. I think you guys will. I think they time it to where if you pre-order it, you get the book on the day that it drops or very close to that, depending on where in the world you are and how long it takes for the publisher to mail it to you, so that the book gets to you and you get to read it, instantly instead of having to run out and stand in the lines at a bookstore. Okay. So hopefully I answered that question, but that plays into everything that is the modus operandi of the Orion Crusaders. Like I said before, please share this out for all of you who are popping in. Deborah, welcome. I see that you're there. Did I miss anybody? If I missed you, say hello to me in the chat, and I'll say hello to you, because if you don't say hello in the chat, then I don't know you're here. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and do a sound check on Raw, and we'll get started with this session. Okay. So here we go.
April 18th, 1981. 47.0 Ra, I am Ra. I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. We communicate now. 47.1 Questioner, could you first give us an...
All right, let me know if you guys can hear that okay, because I'm not sure if you could or not. I'm getting notifications here, sorry. Thank you. And Peter said that's absolutely perfect, loud and clear. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue here, okay?
Indication of the condition of the instrument. Ra, I am Ra. It is as previously stated. 47.2 Questioner, okay. The question that I was trying to ask at the end of the last session was, of what value to evolution or experience in the creator knowing himself are the positive and negative social memory complexes that form starting in fourth density, and why was this planned by the Logos? Ra, I am Ra. There are inherent incorrectnesses in your query. However, we may answer the main point of it. The incorrectness lies in the consideration that social memory complexes were planned by the logos or sublogos. This is incorrect, as the unity of the creator exists within the smallest portion of any material created by love, much less in a self-aware being. However, the distortion of free will causes the social memory complex to appear as a possibility at a certain stage of evolution of mind. The purpose, or consideration which causes entities to form such complexes, of these social memory complexes, is a very simple extension of the basic distortion towards the creator's knowing of itself. For when a group of mind/body/spirits become able to form a social memory complex, all experience of each entity is available to the whole of the complex.
See, so you hear me talking about this a lot because people are starting to get glimpses of this information. It starts with learning about the Akashic records of the halls of Amente, whatever you know it as. That is the record that is up there. That is the literally everything that is being recorded from all of time here on this physical plane is up there from the perspective of the person, the perspective of other people, and the perspective of the universe or the universal mind. So everything is recorded in three different angles. And if there's, say, if I'm speaking like now, and everybody around the world is listening to my words, the emotion and experience of them for this moment is also there being recorded by them in three ways. So if somebody were to tap into the Akashic records and want to tap into specifically, say, this show, they would have access to all of that. And when you have access to a memory, it's not the same as watching it on television where you have this peripheral vision of the room you're in. So you're like, I'm witnessing this as myself. And I'm seeing what's going on. Even if the camera is in first person for the person or goggles on to where you're seeing it like that through their eyes, you still have a sense of, and that's as close as we've ever been able to get until we have these goggles now where we're trying to get you to transition. And that's becoming the new thing, is to put on the goggles and look around and go, wow, man, this is cool. That is already available. And that's why it's so novel to people, because people realize that that is something they're used to already. So when you go there and tap into a resource memory from the halls of Amente, you literally experience it with the same emotion, taste, smell, touch. There is no difference than a dream or than this dream that you're in currently. So when people start to access that a lot, they'll go, I was this person. You know, I know 7 people who claim that they are literally King Arthur reincarnated. Okay. And I will guarantee you that not all 7 of them are they're not all the same soul. But they've all seen that and have access to that memory, so that they're not differentiating their personality here in this place with that personality at that time in time-space. They're not differentiating that. And so what they're doing is they're believing that they are that person. It doesn't mean they're not, because on a high enough level, we're all one anyway. So the truth is they were. But when that person was there and that soul was in that body, that is recorded in history, it wasn't this personality. It's a different personality. It's a different individual personality makeup that is down here on earth at that time. So even if you are the same soul who was that person 400 years ago, you're not the same person. On a high enough level, you are, because you are the same. You are that person. So is it possible that I, say, was Jesus Christ? It is just as plausible that I was Jesus Christ as it is that I wasn't Jesus Christ. It's 50-50. But if I go up high enough, I am Jesus Christ. And so are you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and everybody else on the earth. So from the perspective of the unity, the hive mind complex, when you get to that level alone, not to mention going back to source, When you go back to source, you are everything, including a rock, a tree, air that I'm breathing, water in my cup sitting over here, the cup itself, the sand that makes up the cup. So from that perspective, so it's all a matter of perspective, okay? So that is supposed to expand your consciousness to the idea of that possibility that I might have been King Arthur. But some people get locked into that and I was. Their ego grabs a hold of it, and they're like, I am Jesus Christ. I am, Ashtar. I am. Just because you're tapping into the information and you see it in first person in a astral projection doesn't mean you're necessarily that person. On a high enough scale, when you go up high enough, we all are. So to brag about it and say, I have all the answers to the universe because I am and was this person, so was everyone else. That's what you're actually supposed to expand your consciousness to the idea of. You're supposed to realize that. Ra talks about that early on. When you look at somebody, you have to see the creator. When you look in the mirror and see your reflection, realize you're looking into the eyes of the creator. So treat people as if they are you and you are them. Treat people as if they are the creator. And people go, with the whole, that's where the saying, let's just go to Christianity, of let him who has, or let him who is without sin cast the first stone, or judge not lest ye be judged. Though both of those lessons are parables on that same lesson. But they don't explain that in the Bibles anymore because that information was edited out so that you couldn't know why they were saying that. The connotation is there, and priests will tell you that's what that means. Well, this is what it means, is that we're all God's children. They start with that, for the children. We're all God's children, and so we're supposed to treat people how we want to be treated. Turn the other cheek by Jesus. Evil people always get annoyed with those sayings. So I'm supposed to let somebody just kick my ass and put my other cheek and let them beat me up? There's ego going triggered. I'm not going to do that. Only a pussy will do that. Ego, living in the flesh, thinking only in the physical, not realizing the spiritual, so not moving out of this physical body to understand what was being said to you. You're trying to understand it, trying to stand under it, not understand it, not comprehend it. So the purpose of all of that is you're supposed to expand your consciousness and see it and then question, is that really me? That's why I love it when I hear a psychic and they'll say, please make that stronger. I don't want to think that I'm just making this up. Am I just making this up, or is this information that I'm getting? They're doubting themselves because they don't want to run into the ego and believe that they're the shit and that they're making it up and I'm the one who knows all of this information. They're staying humble on purpose by saying, please give me confirmation of this because I don't want to think that I'm making this up. So that doubt, that self-doubt, even though people will tell you shouldn't have self-doubt, most people who tell you that are driven by ego. You should have some self-doubt. The ego should be working, because you have to have the ego. So the ego should be working in the way that it's supposed to, in the positive. We call that the angel on the right shoulder. That is your conscience, not your consciousness. That is your conscience. That is the other half. That is the positive half of the ego. No one talks about that. Everyone says ego is negative only. Nobody gives you the other half of what ego is. Ego is positive and negative balance, the yin and the yang, the Vesica Pisces. It's supposed to be up and down like that, not sideways, but they show it to you sideways. All of that is the ego. So the ego is not just negative stuff. In fact, the ego gives you negative positives, like I'm the greatest in the world, I'm the baddest in the world, I'm the champion. But that's all positive that the ego is feeding you. Even though it's a negative because it's telling you, oh, I am the greatest. The same thing, the other half of the ego is the conscience that says, don't do that. That's not right. You wouldn't want someone to do that to you. So the ego is more than just a negative thing telling you positive shit or negative shit. The ego is the positiveness that's also telling you positive and negative. Don't do that because you wouldn't want someone to be like that. Think about how that feels to them. There's negative to that positive. Do you see the difference in the connotation from I am the greatest in the world or I am in total fear and they're all trying to get me? And Don't be that way because you wouldn't want someone to be that way. Remember what it feels like to do that. I tell you this because those two activations that you're getting are the same that happens when you go to the Akashic record and you are now becoming that one entity, and you're supposed to realize that choice. And then you're supposed to realize that when you are accessing memories, to differentiate from who you are now and the memory that you're actually accessing there. You're going to get it with all of the emotion, the armpit smell and everything that person felt when it was recorded, emotional wise, psychologically wise, seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, all of that is part of the experience that is being recorded on purpose, because that's what we're here to do, is all of that. So that we and the Creator can become conscious of ourselves in this place and everywhere in between, from nothingness back to the source on every single level. Okay. And so that's literally how you're supposed to see that, but people get caught. And then they listen to the wrong ego. The Native Americans or the natives to North America said, which wolf do you feed, the positive or negative? Which what you become is whatever wolf you feed the most. So if you're listening to the darkness of the ego that everybody just thinks is the ego, and they forget about the other half of that. No one ever talks about that when they say ego. They only talk about the negative and the negative positives of that energy. That's like when they say Kundalini. No one ever says the Kunda buffer energy. Everyone focuses on Kundalini and says, well, that's the twin energies. No. One is called Kundalini. The other is called Kunda buffer. Kundalini is masculine. Kunda buffer is all the feminine. Positive, negative. Masculine, feminine. Do you see? So the positive is the feminine, and the negative is the masculine. But it's the other way around when you get to the astral, and that's what people get confused on. Because the masculine, positive, right, is the male, because that's what you're thinking, because the male has the penis, and the woman is the negative because she has a womb. The truth is, she's the positive because she's the receiver. And the male is the negative because he's pushing everything out. So if you look at electronics and batteries, the positive, even though the positive has the little positive thing there, it's actually the opposite of what you think it is, positive and negative. Because when you move from the physical, which the physical signs of positive aggression, negative nurturing, into the astral, it's actually the opposite. Why is that? Yin and yang, as below, so above, as within, so without. So when you move from the physical plane to the spiritual plane, it is the opposite in that place. So the woman becomes the positive because she is the nurturer, love and things, giving to people, being in service to others. You are positive. Being negative and about yourself, you're negative, you are the opposite. Do you see? You're no longer the aggressor. The aggressor is here, physical. When you're in the spiritual, you're receiving because it's all about yourself. Do you see? And it's a quantum weirdness that people. Jake has a question. I will. Thank you for that. So let me look up here and find out what you guys are talking about. See, if I don't have my glasses on, I don't see any of that. So let me find Jake here and find out what the question was from Jake. It's probably way up here, right? And he said, "Not yelling. You're just trying to get my attention. This is why I need somebody to be in the audience." Okay, so Jake said, if we were a guide for that person to, can you attach yourself to that person in time? Yes. The answer to that is yes. If you were, say, out of body at the time and you were a guide for someone who was here on Earth, you can also tap into that person's memories. So if you were a guide and now you're down here to help or to learn, you still have access to that at some point, and then you could tap into their memories. I hope that was the actual question that you were asking. So the answer to that is, yeah, you can. Can we attach yourself to that person / time? Yes, and you still are. When we sign on for those things, we're still attached because we're part of that learning information that we were assisting. So that goes into our memory as well. So when you're out of here and you're up there in the spirit and you're helping other people and you're not embodying in the flesh, you're still recording. So that's attached to that memory. So when you go to access your own memory, you're also going to access their memory, and you can switch and watch either one coming from above, looking down at that person or what that person is doing. That's on a high scale. So as we get to the halls of Amente, we have that access. And as you start learning that, you start being able to click into those. And the higher we go away from the physical plane, the more we have access to the hive mind that we become until we go back to source. And so Pamela, right after that, let's see, she says, which can cause confusion to the person that thinking that there was in their past life. Yeah, and that was, I don't know if that's what you were talking about, but yes. So the problem is that once you become aware of the information and say you click into the information, but you don't have somebody helping you to understand or understand what that information is, then they just take on that, I am this person, and it gets confusing. And then they start thinking that they are that, and they run around telling everybody that they are, and people think they're crazy. And then eventually they get past that, and then they feel embarrassed about it. And then people usually laugh at them and go, they don't know what they're talking about because they thought they were God. At some point, they thought they were Jesus, or they thought they were somebody or other. You know what I mean? So it's all, yeah, but it's all part of the ascension. And so it depends on where you look. Your perspective is in your perspective is what you are. We are each an individual perspective of what's going on collectively on this planet currently. And you have to realize what Qui-Gon Jinn said in the Star Wars Episode 1, which was the fourth movie, is your focus determines your determination, or your determination and focus determines your reality. So your perspective determines your reality. So if my perspective is, I think I'm Jesus because I'm tapping into that, then that doesn't necessarily mean I was actually that soul at the time who got up on the cross, got whipped and went through all of that and died for everybody. But it could mean that. The time will tell that in your ascension, because ultimately all of us we all are one. So ultimately, when that happened to Jesus, or anything that happened to anyone on this earth, if you want to look at what's his name, from Braveheart, I can't think of his name. I'm thinking all I can think of is the MMA fighter Conor McGregor because of the McGregor name. But if you look at that, you could say I was him in the past life. Well, you might have been, but that doesn't necessarily mean, because who you are now is not that person. So you're supposed to expand your consciousness to the idea of that, but you're also supposed to differentiate, I may have been at one time. And that expands you to, well, truly, when I go up high enough, I am that person. That's what that is supposed to aid you in doing. But at first, down here, because they've taken away most knowledge and people who teach this to you, so that nobody is explaining it like I am anymore, because no one gets to learn it, unless, like myself, I was taught in the very ancient Eastern or Western European way of the Druids. I don't have a piece of paper that has a stamp on it from some Druid religion currently on this earth, but I have a Merlin title. And it took me from the time I was about 4 or 5 until I was 18, almost 19 years of age, of learning from my own father before I got that title. Okay. So literally, the people who are Druids today go and get that title for learning for about maybe 10 years, maybe 5. Some of them, in 2. So the truth is, somebody will go, well, I was taught by the ancient order of so-and-so. How many years were you learning that? So if you read like The Sword and the Stone, you realize that Arthur was being trained for most of his life. If you read the 18 or 21 lessons of Merlin, which are very rare to find on this earth anymore, well, 40 years ago, you could buy that book, and you could still buy, I think, the 21 lessons of Merlin. Or if you read any of the books by Oberon Zell Ravenheart, he was trying to revitalize this information by putting out these 4 books that were literally teaching you what you needed to know to become a wizard or wizardess, a sorcerer, sorceress, a druid or Wiccan priest or priestess, because of the same reason that I'm doing it, because it's been taken away and eradicated. And there's an information and what's being taught is that you have access to this knowledge, but it doesn't mean that you are that knowledge, but then it does mean you are that knowledge. So don't get arrogant about it and go, I am the only Jesus. I was the only one. When you think that at all, you're not, because you're ego. So for me to go, I am the knowledge of all the best knowledge in the world and the best Merlin ever, I'm not. And I'm having a problem with my ego by saying it. So anyone who says that, I have this, I have that title, I have this, I have many titles. And when I tell people, they go, you can't possibly have all those titles. No, I do. I don't have like 100 titles, but I have a lot. Okay. And more that they've given me. The council that are on the other side have given me all kinds of titles that I don't use. I have people come to me and say, I just got, I'm, this medium. I got a message for you. The council says you can use this title. Oh, thank you. Thank them for me. No. I didn't even want to be called a teacher until about 3 years ago. My entire life, people wanted to call me teacher. And I'm like, I'm a guide. Please don't call me that. And they kept telling me it's not for you. It's for them. Relax about that. I wouldn't do it. I didn't want to come out and tell people anything about myself. I have been hiding for most of this life because I've had to hide in almost every life I've been on this earth. Can't say almost. I can say almost because there was a few I just took off and said, I'm not doing a fucking thing. I'm just going to live. So I didn't have to hide because I wasn't doing anything. I turned it all off, not doing it, threw a temper tantrum. Apparently the lifetime just before this one, I did that. Took it off, done, not helping. World can get by without me. I'm not teaching. I'm not guiding. I'm not doing anything. Turning it off, not listening to anyone. La, 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 la. Can't hear anything, not doing it. Apparently I did that. Okay. So hopefully I'm back to current here. And hopefully I didn't miss any questions. If I did, please, I'm going to, as my book comes out, you'll see that I will stop doing these alone. I'm going to have somebody who will be on monitoring to do the producing, to be able to read the chat and say, we're going to take questions and this person's asked that question. Because it's getting more difficult for me. I have to keep I try to take my glasses off so you can see my eyes without a glare, so that, you know what I mean? So that becomes an issue, and I don't want to put in context because I don't like putting anything in my eyes. So I have to actually put my glasses on and look down so you guys can still see my eyes a little bit better. But I try to take them off so you guys can see the truth of what I'm saying in my eyes when I'm talking to you. Because if you're really paying attention, those of you who know me, and those of you who understand how things work, you guys know when I'm channeling and when I'm not by the eyes. And that's why I try to show people that, because this looks like I'm trying to hide and not let you see my eyes. Whenever I see somebody channeling like this with their eyes closed, I'm like, yeah, I don't buy that. It's legit, because they're not letting me, because I have the sight. I can look into everyone's eyes. I can tell you if you're possessed. I can tell you if you're evil just by looking at your eyes. I don't even need you to speak, because I have that ability. I always have my entire life, brought it with me in this lifetime so that I can do what I do. Instantly from any distance, if I see your eyes, I know whether you're a threat to me or not, whether you're evil or whether you're not. Can't hide. Doesn't matter what you're saying. Doesn't matter how cool you're trying to be. Doesn't matter how much you think you're getting over on me. I see you when I see you. And we teach this, and we did this for a long time. So when somebody would say, can I get a reading? We would be like, I need to see a picture of yourself. Because those of us who are doing reads need to see your eyes, because we don't want you hiding from us. Because some people will put up a picture and it's not even them. It's not you. They do it now. You get people that are pretending to be some woman. I'm like, that's a porn star. You're not that person. Right? Turns out there's somebody in Africa, a black male, trying to be a white woman or whatever to try and rip people off. So when I see the picture, I'm like, I look in the eyes, that's not you. You're not that person. You're someone else pretending. No, I'm not. What makes you think that? Because that picture that you're showing me is not the soul that is speaking to me right now. And that usually freaks out AI, right? And it freaks out anybody who is a slave that's working, and their job is to do that, right? Joanne, welcome. I don't know if I said hi to you. So So literally, hopefully that helps. Let's get back to Ra talking a little bit more. But all of that is the modus operandi of people that are in service to self, and it's supposed to help you to expand your consciousness as potentiation. Okay, so the modus operandi of evil people is to control all of that, to keep you from ever learning it. And they've done a great job because people like me have to try and help you guys. Do you see? Because it's not readily for you to just look up somewhere and read. But the problem is there's so much disinformation and misinformation out there. I have people ask me all the time, is there a good book that you want me to? There hasn't been a really good book that I have found in a very long time. It's unfortunate. Back 40 years ago, there was a lot out there. I'm sure there's some. I'm not saying that the books out there aren't. Otherwise, I wouldn't be writing a book. Okay, so there's information that is out there. But you have to take everything with a grain of salt these days. And that's why I let people just look it up, find something that works for you and see how it turns out. And that's what I say about myself too. If you guys aren't drawn to me, don't feel bad about staying, because you're not. If you feel drawn to somebody else, go and follow them. Follow as many people as you can. My father taught me that when I was little, when I said, Dad, are we Christian? Because, there's a church across the street, Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, they're Christian. Different than a Roman Catholic church, but still Christian. And literally, I grew up across the street from a church. One of the parking lots was next to my house. Across the street from the church parking lot was butted up against the side of my house. Literally, it was only about 20 feet from my house. At the end of the property line was a parking lot. So my father said, don't just follow in footsteps because of that. You need to look at, if you want to go down that road, look at all the religions, read about them, get their books, their tomes, their scrolls, read that. Go and talk to their clergy, go and see a mass, go to their church, learn from them, and search all of that. Don't just pick one because your grandparents do it. And find what fits for you, if anything at all. If you need a religion, you'll know it because it'll fit somewhere. It'll fit. If you don't need the religion, it's not going to fit. Meanwhile, he was teaching me about, Druidism and the pagan way or the Wiccan way, whatever you want to call those religions, when they were blended as one before they were separated into masculine and feminine. Now they're both again, which is good, right? So now Druids are men and women and Wiccans are men and women. But back in the day, say when Arturius was learning from that Merlin, Arthur was learning, the Druid religion was all masculine and the Wiccan religion was all women. So it was men teaching one. And so they were separated. And there was a reason for the separation, was to teach the men, the masculine part of the total religion. And the ancient way was they were all one. And then eventually they would reunite. So when I say that, the fact that Wiccans are men and women and Druids are men and women, and there's not much separation in those two religions now, is because we've come full circle. We're now blending and starting to move back into this, because we're moving away from the Mars, the god of war, Baktun 12, and moving into to Venus, the god of love and wisdom, Baktun 13. And getting away from that's why we're in the age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius is synonymous with the fish, Aquarius, the fish, the Jesus teaching. And you can look all of that up if you're a theologian. You know what I'm talking about. The feminine, the wisdom and the caring and the nurturing, the in service to self or in service to others, not in service to self way of things. So everything is coming back to the quality of the duality of the human existence, getting away from the masculine warlike gods or the feminine warlike gods, and getting away from the feminine, caring and nurturing singularity and the masculine, and moving into the duality, no longer the male dominated, no longer the woman taking the back seat. And on the other hand, not being the woman taking the god and the goddess, or the goddess being in charge and the god being beneath the goddess, which is a lot of the pagan way, a lot of some of the Greek stuff with Pan, and the goddess being forever and the rebirth being of the masculine, and like the cyclical nature of the universe to explain that, or the cyclical nature of the earth to explain that. God is reborn from the goddess. It's not untrue, but it's not as necessary, because that was necessary for the teachings that are supposed to raise us above that to realize that that is the Vesica Pisces, the yin and the yang. That is the Vitruvian man. That is the five-pointed star. It's all of that, and we're supposed to realize and transcend that. And as we're transcending, that's why don't you think about why negative people use that tranny transition as a way of confusion, because they take everything and turn it to a confusion. They take the cross and turn it upside down. They take the star and they turn it upside down. They take the saying, do what thou wilt, but harm none, and turn it to do what thou wilt. So why would they not use transition in a negative form? That's why it's the biggest negative thing right now that has to do with sexuality as a person in the physical on this earth currently. It's because that is what we're doing as a race, is we're transitioning. So they're trying to get you to believe the synonymousness of transition means mutilating your body and transitioning to the opposite. Because you notice that they don't say anyone's normal, right? What they're saying is that all men are women and all women are men. They're not saying that there's anybody in the right place. They're saying everybody is supposed to be the opposite. That is because they're trying to get everybody in the mindset that transition means physical sexuality, not transitioning to the spiritual, away from the physical altogether. So it's not by a mistake or accident that they're using transition, transmutation for physical. And that is the biggest thing they're pushing currently, besides anarchy, death, mayhem, pandemonium, and the destruction of all society, so that they can go back to a fiefdom, to a kingdom, to a monarchy, because they need all of us to kill each other, because they have to get rid of a bunch of the population, because right now 68% of the population is here to help. They got to lower those people and make them recycle, so they have to annihilate as much as this earth as they possibly can, and they're working on trying to do that at every turn. Because of the temporal war, they know what's going on. I know some of you out there are probably thinking, what does this have to do with the law of one, bro? Everything. It's what the modus operandi of the Orion Crusaders was. Those of us who chase them here are trying to restore order and put this planet back upright. It's off kilter right now. Look it up. It's off kilter by a certain degrees. Crooked. That guy is crooked. The planet is crooked, not upright. Be upright. When you get knighted, I was knighted. When you get knighted, be upright. They're telling you that. The Christian religion, be upright. Okay, so what they're saying is be polarized the proper way. The earth is not polarized the proper way because it had flipped over on its axis, because evil people did evil shit and the pendulum swung away from, because the devil shall rule the earth for a time. That means a beginning, a middle, and an end to that time. Okay? That time is ended, but you just don't know about it. The people of this earth don't know about it because the crazy people in the insane asylum are running the insane asylum, because those who came here, created this scenario, have already ran away. I know, because I was part of the contingents that chased them out of here. And we're here to mop up now. But we have to restore order to the planet itself, to the ley lines of the earth, and I know you in Europe hate it when we Americans say ley lines, to the energy lines of the earth, and all of the chakras of the earth, not to mention the individuals on it and in it. Okay, so we're working on that. Kevin has a question. Kevin Cummings, where's your question, Kevin? I see you just said, hello, Leo. Hi, everyone. Is it true that there is no mental illness, only people who don't know how to behave? Well, all mental illness is that, in a sense. So the question, that's not a simple question. I think you asked that question. I know you, and I think you asked that question because you loaded that question. The simple answer is yes, like I said, but that's not a simple answer, okay? Because most mental illness, if you go back in time, I have a buddy who's schizophrenic, right? I hope that was the question that you had, bro. If you have another question that I didn't see, please type it and I'll get to that. A buddy of mine, schizophrenic, hears voices in his head. You go back to the time of Delphi, and if he was a female, he would have been the oracle at Delphi. But now he's crazy because he hears voices. Most of what is a mental illness is either confusion because of what's going on, and that's confusing to a person, or and most of it is the ego and the separation. But it can also be, okay, so let me explain the ego first, and then I'll go on to what it also could be. That the ego is trying to get your attention. You are confused because you're in service to self, or even could be in service to others, but you're confused by what's going on here. And so what happens is, if you have a trauma, now I'm going to give you the clinical definition. If you have a trauma that happens to you, and you're trying to separate yourself from that moment, you're being raped, you're being beaten, you're being tortured, whatever it is that's happening to you, especially at a younger age, you will then try to turn off the memory. That happens normally. You'll turn off the memory of the event happening to you, and that gets stored somewhere, creates problems as you get older until you eventually realize that and unlock that negative energy that's stored. Why? Because the human condition, this body, records it as now. So for you to then see that thing, you're going to see it for the first time. For the first time, it's going to be exactly with all the emotional attachment to it that you went through it because the body can only record it that way. So when you unlock that memory, it's going to come up that way, and you have to see it under a controlled environment, or you're going to feel like and believe you are there as that little boy or little girl. So what happens is sometimes the ego assists us by creating another character to replace you as your personality at that moment. Then what happens is that creates a split in your personality, and that persona, until you deal with that thing, can still be an individual separating you in a conscious way. So you'll believe you're this person, and then all of a sudden you won't be here anymore, and you won't have memory, and there'll be another person, and it's actually you. But you've now, the ego has taken on that, and you believe you are that other person as well. And you believe that you don't know about each other. Or you'll hear the voice in your head and know it's another voice in your head that's talking to you, but you believe that the ego and the thinking mind is now a separate entity from you, and you give it a personality, and it takes on that personality because the ego needs to have your attention no matter what. Okay. So that is, if you watch the movie of Fight Club, that's what it entailed, what happened there. They don't tell you what happened to him to create the split, but they kind of show you a little bit that his life was so stressful that the split was happening over time. So if you watch the beginning of the movie and you really pay attention and you have good enough sight, you'll see that they put Tyler Durden into his vision, where it would flip into his vision for a half second or a second and then disappear. And that happened more and more until it stopped. And when it stopped was when Tyler Durden started doing things, and you're unaware of that. And then they introduced Tyler Durden, and you see him as a separate person sitting, talking to, fighting with him. And you don't realize until the end of the movie that it was all him, until he realizes it. It was beautifully written. So that's one scenario for mental illness. The other part of mental illness is that you're actually tapping into the consciousness of you in other realities currently that you tap into when you're not in this one, or other memories of other lifetimes that you've had on this earth. And they're bleeding over into now, and you are like, I'm hearing voices and they're saying weird things. It's like we're recording a ghost or an image, a voice that's coming from another time, and you're communicating across time, and you find out, wait, I'm communicating with somebody who's been dead for 500 years. But we're having a conversation in the now. But for them, this is 500 years ago, and they think it's now. They're starting to realize that in ghost hunting. So there's so much of the space-time continuum that plays in those layers. So the truth is that most people see mental illness as something that's going on physically in the brain that's causing people to do hideous things, when most of the time it's not. And it's going to take a while for people to realize that. People who are in service to self have more mental illness than people who are in service to others. Why? They don't know that they don't believe that there's an outside entity that is an ego. And what happens is, physiologically in the brain, the consciousness, the conscience in the consciousness goes away. And the ego, the evil part of the ego, becomes more apparent. And they've literally said there's a part of the brain, a lobe in the brain that's not developed. in these people who are narcissists and compulsive liars. So the physical, when you choose to be one way or the other, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail, changes the brain chemistry. So when you choose to be in service to self, and I am evil and I like it, your conscience becomes less available to you than your ego. The ego gets bigger, the conscience gets less. When people choose to be in service to others, the conscience becomes more apparent to you and the ego becomes less. Physically, and changes in your brain. Physiologically, scientists have seen this, know it. An example, people who seek power are almost always, 90% of them are in service to self. People who have power, the reason they say ultimate power corrupts ultimately is because when people have a lot of power and they are in service to self, as the conscience diminishes, there's a lobe in the brain that gets larger and they do more things, raping women, stealing things, doing things, because there's a part of the brain that they have discovered is enlarged. And they're claiming that makes them act that way. It doesn't make them act that way. When they chose to be in service to self, there is a physical, as above, so below, as within, so without, or as without, so within, however you want to say those things, physiological change that they have talked about. I'm going to have to put this in my next book, that they have been able to realize that is true. So when a person makes the decision, once you make a decision, I'm going to be evil or I'm not, that changes everything about the physiological makeup of not only your taste and what you watch and what you read and what you eat and what you smell and everything and how you look at life, but it physically changes your brain chemistry, and the physicalness of the brain itself changes. Certain lobes of the brain enlarge one way or the other, depending on your choice. Do you see? Science hasn't caught up to that yet. They're getting there because they're aware of it, but they haven't made the connection to the spiritual, because most science is all about, we've got to prove that this is all that there is, because they don't believe in spirituality. Okay? So like Peter is saying, let me go back and see if I missed anything from you guys. So if you guys have anything, comments, please go ahead and comment. But Peter made a comment here. Peter said, when you focus on tomorrow, we can see the future. And once we do that, we can predict scenarios when in the future, it's all got to do with meditation, frequency, and numbers, energy, frequency, vibration. Okay, let me put that up on the screen for those of you who can read it, what Peter said. So if you want to know the future, you focus in your mind and look to the future. Your future, your determination, your focus determines your reality. So when you want to look at somebody, you have to actually do that. A medium, say, you're going to get a reading from me as a medium. I will look at you and then I look into your future. So as I'm looking at you and we're going to do the reading, I look into you and go into your future and look at all the probable future outcomes that you have and address what you're asking me for. Because you can't see some of that because it'll break free will and there's organic things that you're supposed to learn. However, a medium can't see those things either. They can see them, but they can't tell you those things either if you've already decided that that thing is for you to learn organically. And that's why I always rate a medium by whether or not they will admit that to you. Can't tell you that because you're supposed to learn that. No one wants to hear that, so most mediums try to get around that because they don't want people to go, well, I'm not paying you. You're no good because you're not telling me what I want to know. Well, that's because you've set that down to not know that for yourself. You're supposed to, but you're not. But most people won't listen to that. And they'll go, you're just an idiot. You don't know, and you can't see. So I'm out of here, and I'm going to tell everybody that you're no good. So most mediums won't say those things to people because they're afraid of the ridicule, and they try to get around that in a way that doesn't usurp free will. They're aware of it if they know what they're talking about, whether they say it to you or not. That's high magic. That's magic with a K. But if they never do that and you never hear them and they just give you a definitive answer to every one of your questions, you need to question whether or not that person, you're either asking every question that you can know the answer to, or that person's not legit. That's why we used to test them. When somebody would say, I want to be a reader for you on our group, which I've changed the name of the group, so it's no longer a group about teaching people reading. It's now returning to the old ways. But we would make you read 3 of us, and then we would discuss that with each other without you being there. And you couldn't read all 3 of us at once. It had to be individual readings for each one of us. And then we would, in the background, talk to each other about the person. And then we would say, okay, we do that to assess where you are without your knowledge. And we would pick 3 people who are very hard to read, who can stop you from doing a reading on them if they want to, and make you work hard at it to find out what your skill level is on purpose. And if you're not able to read us because we're stopping you, we then unlock that and allow you, and we lower that bar to find out where you are. So there's some of us who are aware of all of that. Okay. So what you focus, your focus determines your reality, also determines where you look. You want to read something about someone's past, a past life regression, you look into the past. Do you see? So Peter is saying that, and then it has to do with numbers as well, because numbers have to do with the physical plane as well as the astral plane. Right. And then Pamela said, remember though, that names, etc., is a human thing, so that we will give you names to make it easier for us to comprehend on and remember that differently. So honestly, names will come, but they aren't necessarily, that's right. And because we identify here as the individual with the individual name. That's why I have my personal name, and then if you look at my page, it says Kelto Crow Eagle. Kelto is the name that I choose as my Merlin name and as my Jedi master name. Crow Eagle is my Wiccan Druid magical name. So I use Kelto Crow Eagle. Kelto means Keltoi from the Greeks, which is where we get the word Celtic. So my name is telling people what my race is, Kelto. It's telling you that my race is Keltoi, and that Greek word Keltoi is the word catch-all phrase for the Vikings that lived up north from them. That literally meant, Keltoi meant those people who live up north who are not Greek. And that is what we ended up learning to call the Celtic people, from the Keltoi Greek word. We don't know what they called themselves because they never told anyone, because they were true Vikings. They never taught anybody their language, and they never told anybody with the name of what they called themselves. That tells you they were Vikings, because that was the Viking way. So everybody in Europe, from Southern Europe, Western Europe, all the way up the north, they all had the same consistency of never teaching anyone their language and learning their language, never telling people what they called themselves. So the name Viking that we get now comes from a term that doesn't mean a race of people. It actually means marauding, raping, pillaging, marauding, going a Viking. Okay. But it also stems from the different clans that were in the ancient. Like right now we have the Russians. They were from the Rus clan. There used to be a group of people that were living at the steppes of Russia that were called the Hessians. They were of the Viking clan Hess. And then you had the Geats. And then you had the Vic. Okay. Thor was a Geat. Ragnar Northbrook was a Geat from Denmark. Okay. So you had Geatland, Norway, which was Nord, right? That's where they get the word Nordic. Northern people, Nordic people, comes from the Nord, from the north. That's what that means. Northman. Nordic, Norway means Northland. Okay. So literally most of the people in the Middle East used to call the Vikings the sea people. That was the name for them, sea people. Different people had different names for the same people. Okay. So I call myself Kelto Crow Eagle because of what the crow and the eagle represent as my spirit totems on this earth in this lifetime. So names are what we call someone in the physical, and this is where Pamela is right about that. As you move into the spiritual, pretty soon there is no more names. It's only your energy. and your energy is a signature. And when you meet someone, you will know everything that there is to know about them, their entire past, their entire present, and their entire future. But that's not going to happen in the third dimension. That only happens as you go into the fourth and the fifth. And as you do that, so the closer you get to somebody in proximity, you know everything that there is to know about them. They know everything there is to know about you. So there's no lying anymore. You can't lie and pretend you are something. So you are open and honest with everyone, and so are they with you. So that is only in a place that's occupied by people who are in service to others, because people who are self-serving can't live in that environment because they can't hide. Do you see? So when the separation happens, after here, they can't hide in plain sight anymore, because as soon as you get near them, you know they're evil. We already start having that sight. Let's continue with Ra, and you'll see what we're talking about. But then again, if you guys have any other questions, please let me know. Denise said, Leo, from now on, if it's okay, I'll be going to put our question in caps. Yeah, because until I get somebody who's on air with me, which I'm going to be starting to work on to get somebody to be on live with me when I do these things, you'll see that there'll be somebody who, because then I can look at the camera and they can read the chat and then put the questions up and ask them. Once I do have my book coming out and people are interviewing me, you'll see that that's going to happen anyways, because I'm not going to be producing and directing and being a one-man show anymore. So I'm already starting to transition to that. But right now we're in those growing pains where it's frustrating for me and you, because when you're trying to ask questions, I'm still sitting here and I can't see unless I put on my glasses. So I apologize for that. But please, yes, get my attention. So Denise had a question. Because Pamela just did it in caps. Leo, if you click on it, it was a question that Denise had. Oh, okay. So Denise had that. I didn't see that. I apologize for that. So Denise was bringing that up. So yeah. So until I get somebody to come on here, and I haven't. I'm going to look in. I'm starting to look into that, because I need somebody to be on here to do this for me, so that I can just talk and answer questions, because it's becoming hard. Even if I was on my phone, like people do when they go live, they still have to look down. So I still have to look down. But for me, I have to wear glasses. So I have to look down and see the questions here. So if I leave my glasses on, then I feel that it sucks for you guys, because you see the glare right in my eyes, because I can see that when I look at the camera. So I have to look every couple of seconds, look down at that and then answer the question, and then look back down and see what I missed. So if you guys ask like 4 or 5 questions and I give a long answer, I have to scroll up. So I apologize for that. That's why I go, if you have questions, ask them now before I get going. So I'm going to go ahead and let Raw play. And if you do have questions, please type those now while we're listening to Raw before I start talking again. That way I can read while you guys are listening. Okay. So if you have any questions to clarify anything of what we talked about, I will pause, because as we start going and transition to my book, I won't be doing as much of the Law of One and playing Raw as much. So for those of you who are just fans of the Law of One, you can still ask me the questions, but you're not going to be hearing the sessions, because it's going to be more me teaching than it is me listening and translating the Law of One. All right, so let's continue, right?
Thus the Creator knows more of its creation in each entity partaking of this communion of entities. 47.3 Questioner, we chose the values of, or you were given the values of, better than 50% service to others for 4th density positive and better than 95% service to self for 4th density negative social memory complexes. Do these two values correspond to the same rate, shall I say, of vibration? Ra, I am Ra. I perceive you have difficulty in expressing your query.
Yeah, Joanne brought up a good point. She said, let me put it up on the screen. She said, you can also bring things through from past lives to help you in this lifetime. Yeah, absolutely. I kind of touched on that earlier. You bring in abilities that will help you in this lifetime. In each lifetime that you come in, you bring in certain abilities that you have access for yourself. That's why people say, find your true bliss or find your calling. Most of the time, if you're in service to others, you're going to have abilities or something that's there for you to find that lane for you. Like, for instance, I brought in healing, I brought in mediumship, I brought in the sight so I could see. But then again, I was born in this lifetime and made sure that I set up things so that I would be unveiled. Okay. So that I could do what I'm doing now and going forward, I needed all of this information in this lifetime for me to do. So I developed this lifetime so that it would be a personification of me as a spirit coming into this life in the physical to aid me into that, so that it was designed. The parents that I had, the place I was born, the time I was born, the time of month, the time of day, everything, including what my name would be, what my race is, what my DNA would be, what my sun sign would be. I'm literally a 33 life number. So I'm in the highest ascended master. Jesus was a 33. I'm not comparing myself and saying I'm the savior, because I didn't come here to do that. So I'm not the one that's supposed to be the savior of the world, but I'm here doing the same work. I'm here to assist and guide. I'm not here to sacrifice myself on a cross or be a martyr so that other people will live. That was already done. It was done 2,000 years ago, and other times, 11 other times on the face of the earth by an individual who the last time that individual came to the earth was called Jesus. And that's going to be in my next book, where I'm going to show those other scenarios where we believe, those of us in the academic world of this believe that those personification, like the Buddha, the Lao Tzu, we believe was that same exact person. There was one of the gods of Egypt was also that persona. And if you look in history, I've already discovered 7, and we believe there was 12 total. 7 that we can prove, where they did all the same things: walked on water, turned water into wine, all of the things that are of the Christos, of the Christ, of the Savior, that is in the physical, that is in us physiologically and spiritually, that took on these personifications in the physical over and over to show us what happens to us in the ascension in us, and what changes our physiological makeup and brain by our choice and on how we live our life. And that I start telling you, this book that's coming out that is going to be the general education book. So I'm going to throw a ton of information. I read the entire edit. It's not going to be more than like 100 pages, I think. But the information that is packed into that is just as fast as I give you information as I speak. In that, and if you read it from cover to cover in one setting, you're going to pop, unless you're ready not to, because there's going to be so much information. You're going to go, holy crap, I can't believe that I just read all of that. And it's going to be like a download. So even though it's only about 100 pages long, I think that's what we figured out that it is, like condensed from like 150 pages down to about 100 pages, purely because of I don't want it to be a novel that's 1,000 pages long, because it's going to be hard for people to get through now at 100 pages. It's going to be a general education, so it's going to be all of this information thrown at you in a very short amount of time. That's going to be a little bit about everything, and then I'm going to get into more details and do chapters on things in the next book, so I will be talking about that. So we know of 7 for certain already, and we think that there was 12 total, where literally these things were done over and over. Walked on water, made the blind see, made the deaf hear, healed the lame. Same thing happened. And so people reading these things go, well, that must have been just borrowed from that other religion, another religion, another religion. So it must go back to the Mesopotamian scrolls, and they don't catch the correlation of Marduk. And because it's a different scenario, different way of telling the same Savior character. So because of that, they don't see that one. And they go, well, everything else must have been borrowed from that story. But people like, there are a few people like, what's his name? I can't think of his name right now. He wrote the book, Hero with 1,000 Faces. He was seeing in mythology that there is this hero segment of your Joseph Campbell. Thank you, Joseph Campbell. That there is this segment of your persona that goes through that hero quest, and personifying that by showing you in theology, in mythology, in the world, that all the stories that are ever been told are about that quest. And he, even though he was a devout Christian, a very devout Christian, he didn't get into a lot of the religions themselves, but he was trying to help expand the consciousness of people into the understanding that that scenario is inherent in everything. It's part of the cyclical nature that makes us up. And because of that it is part of the universe, and it is the cyclical nature of the universe. So therefore, it is the building blocks. It's the golden mean ratio, or the 3, 6, and 9, or the Fibonacci sequence personified in the characters of in history. So the same thing foretells that, and this is all going to go in my next book because I don't explain it like I'm explaining to you now in the book that's about to come out. Although I do touch on it. So all of these characters throughout time are us, and we live that daily. We just don't recognize that in ourselves. Okay. So I'm not sure I'd have to do the math on that, Rick, because he was talking about the numbers, right? Of what so what you do is, if you add those all up, if you're Rick, whatever your birthday is, so if that's your birthday, 7/22 or no 22/04/70, so you add all those up, and so what you do is you go 22 plus 4 plus 1, or add them individually. 2 and 2 is 4, 0 and 4 is 4. 1, 9, 7, and 0. So 1 and 9 is 10. That's 17. So then you would add those three together, or you could just add them all up. Doesn't matter. 4, 4, and 17, right? So 4 and 4 is 8, and 17 is 25, or is that 35? 25, and then 2 and 5 is 7. So so your life, you're right. So you'd be a 7, because 7 is only divisible by 7 and 1, right? Otherwise, if you break it down, it breaks down to like 4 and 3, or or whatever. So that's the lowest number that you can break that down to without separating it into two odd numbers, one even, one odd, to make that 6 and 1, 5 and 2, 4 and 3. You see what I'm saying? So you're a life. So you look up the life number 7. So if you look up mine, right, because I'm 9/10/1967, that adds up to 33, and you can say 33, 3 and 3 is a 6. But if you reach 11, 22, or 33, those are ascended master numbers, because 11 is 2, and 22 is 2 and 2 is 4, which is 2, and 33 is 3 and 3 is 6, which is 3, 6, or 9, right? So you don't, because it's all divisible by 3. So you can downplay them, everything down to the lowest common denominator, but all ascended masters are going to be a 1, a 2, or a 3. And apparently I didn't know any of this when I was asked by Ray, who's one of the oracles. I didn't even know what a life number was. This is about, 5 or 6 years ago. She said, give me your birth. And so I gave her just that. And then when we did it to where it was, I was born September, right? I was born at 9:35 p.m. at night on I think it was a Saturday. Don't quote me on that. I'd have to look it up. Could have been a Tuesday. I'm getting Tuesday. So when you look up all of that and then look at the minute that I was born on, so literally the hour and minute, it also all adds up to personifying the 33. And I didn't even know what that meant. And she's like, that is the highest ascended master. She said, for instance, Jesus Christ was a 33. And I was like, what does that mean? I had to look it all up. So, right, Penny, right, there's an 11. You're an ascended master, right? So literally, as Penny just did hers, 1/8/1973, and that's an ascended master. And Denise, if you go to a 3, how did you get to that 3? Did you get to the 3 from a 6, or did you get to the 3 from a 33? So if you're a 3, then there's a possibility that you had to get to that 3, so you had to downplay it because you didn't add up all your numbers and come up with only the number 3, because the number has to be ended up in a 2-digit number always. So to get to the 3, you were something else first. So it might have been more than likely it was a 6, or a 9, or a 12, or a 33, or a 22, or an 11. Well, it would have been a 22 or 11, something divisible by 3. So 30. Okay, so you were a 30. So you missed the ascended master, but you're still a 3. You should look that up, because an ascended master becomes a 3 or becomes a 6. So you're what the 22 would have become, even though the 22 is a 4. 4 is 3 plus 1, right? So you should look up 3 and see what that means. You could just Google that. What is my life number? And you can look up life number 3 and just read what it says. And you can look that up on many different sites, and you'll find that they're all generalized, but they're very specifically generalized. So it's not like reading pulling up a piece of paper, or, a newspaper, or I'm a Virgo. Let's see what Virgo is for today. If you read Virgo today, this is going to be every Virgo on the face of the earth and it's going to be a generalization. Your life number is going to be a little bit more specific. You'll find that out. It'll be a lot like your zodiac sign, where if you find where you fit in the cusps of your zodiac sign, you read what that zodiac sign is with these different, and then look up moreover what was the sun cycle, moon cycle at the time, and find out what your planets are. You'll find that was all designed by the creator of this logos of the universe, and every logos, sub logos down to us, on purpose, so that we are individual people. That's why when you have twins that were born on the same day but minutes apart, sometimes seconds apart, they're completely different individuals. Why? Because they are literally not born at the exact same time. Even if it was a C-section, one comes into the earth and then the other does. You can't get Romulus and Remus to where you pull them both out at the same time. Do you see? So that personifies the individualness of that person from that point on. So that develops your characteristics in this place, all of those factors. To know more about who you are and what you are to become and how, all of those things need to be taken into consideration to help you to understand and do shadow work. So as I was doing that in life, I was finding out as time went on that were giving me validation as to, well, that explains why I'm unveiled, because I personified everything to do what I'm doing. And I was taught the first rule in Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. When I was little, and my father said, you'll come a time when you'll be okay with that. But right now you can't tell people this stuff because they won't understand it, and they will literally remove you from my care, and the government will take control of you and try to exploit you and test you and literally try to figure you out and use you to their advantage. He was absolutely right. By the time I was 11 years of age, they were trying to do just that, recruiting me. Trying to recruit me to go to work for them in skunk works. And I'm not even kidding you. Okay. And I was, luckily enough, I already had my father telling me, be careful when this gets out. They're going to find out about you. And when they do, you have to be prepared. And they did sooner than he and I thought. I was 11. And one day I was at school after I had been taken out of class. So that means they already were looking at me, took me out of class with the other 15 kids, and were tested in a Winnebago out on the quad that drove into our school, and no one got to know about it without permission from our parents. I was tested in all kinds of different things, and then went back. And then not too long after that, a few days later, I was taken out of class by another person in a smock looking like a doctor with a clipboard. And when I went to the office where I was taken, my father was removed from his job and brought there by 2 Air Force officers who took over the office from the principal, and I was set down in the office, and they were trying to recruit me to join the Star League to defend the frontier against Zur and the Kodan Armada at 11 years of age. Not a joke. Happened in real life. And they were very convincing to telling me about how much I would have in my life and how I would have all of them. They can't tell me what I'll be doing, and that I will have more access to anything I would ever imagine in my entire life and be rich beyond the dreams of avarice and all of this stuff. And I was smart enough then, being unveiled, to say I need time to think about it and talk to my father. And he would not tell me what to do. He said, you have to make a decision of what you want to do and the type of person that you want to become far earlier than I had anticipated for you. You have to decide whether you're going to be in service to others or in service to self, and whether you're going to be a soldier or a warrior. And he said, remember what those 2 terms mean. And you ultimately, I can't make that decision for you. At 11, my own father was not going, no, son, you don't want to do this. He was like, you got to figure this out. What does your instinct say to you that you should be doing here? You have to trust your instincts. What kind of being are you? And he made it a test. And I was like, it doesn't feel right. I don't need to be working for them. I think they're evil. He said, then what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to tell them no. He says, then I'm behind you 100%. And then we went back and met with them and said no. And no, man, they kept harping on me until I was 27. And then they try to recruit me still to this day, or try to force me to not do anything. Okay. So literally, that's not a joke. That really happened to me, and there's no way I can prove that. So some people could just not believe me and go, you're lying. You just made all that up. Okay. I don't care. I don't care because I don't need the validation of every single human to believe that that story is true. You can either choose to believe me or choose not to. And I do that in everything. So that's why people go, you worried that someone talks shit about you? Nope. Because that is a test for everybody else. Everybody else has to either believe it and stop talking to me or not believe it. And I always say, if somebody's talking shit about me, follow them for a while then. Follow them. See where they take you. Because I'm that person that'll go, don't touch that. But I'm not going to tackle you every time you try and go to touch that. Because eventually you're going to wait until I'm asleep and you're going to go and touch it and burn your hand. Okay? So as an adult, I'm not going to tell you don't touch that. Because now you're an adult. You should know better. Because you should have burned your hand and got burned when you were younger. If that hasn't happened to you yet, that's your own fault. Because that means somebody's been sheltering you in a way that they shouldn't have been your entire life. Now, I'm not saying you should go and put on a hot stove and put your kid in front of it to burn. That's child abuse. And I'm not saying you shouldn't tell the kid, don't, when they're going, don't touch that, it'll burn you. Because you're supposed to let them know and prove to them that you're trying to have their better interest at heart and you're trying to keep them safe. Okay. So, but if they go and do it when you're not looking after you told them that, if you're pretending, then you're being evil and you know it. Okay. So that you know that's wrong. You should know that too. However, that doesn't apply when people say, well, because this happened a lot here in the United States about 20 or 30 years ago when people were having parties and somebody would get chickenpox. And people would get all the kids exposed to chickenpox. And a lot of people were trying to sue them and take their kids away because of child abuse when they were saying we need to give them chickenpox when they're children, because if they get it when they're adults, they could die from it. So it's better they get it now and get it out of the way and build up an immunity to it. A lot of people in this country were very, very against that for a while until people were winning court cases and science came to their defense and said, well, the truth is, they should. There's nothing wrong with that. People were trying to get them removed from having a license to practice as doctors because they would speak out and say that. Same thing happened during COVID, and people were being, chased away and shut down and shunned and discredited, and people were trying to keep people from telling people the truth about COVID and trying to get them fired and ruin their practice and all this stuff because and now they've been validated. 99% of everything said about COVID during COVID, no matter how heinously crazy it sounded to you at the time, has come to fruition to be true, including there's stuff in there, there's metal particles in the shot that is doing damage to the insides of people's veins. And everyone said, that is just insane. You guys are crazy. And then the Japanese looked into it and found out it was actually true and banned all American company shots from their country. And other countries did the same thing. But if you're an American, you probably still don't know that. But if you live in any other country, you probably do know what I'm telling you is true. We in America were saying that at the time and being deleted and snuffed off of and deplatformed for saying it by these corporations. And some of them, if you had a big enough voice, were suing in this country and getting cease and desist clauses from courts against you so you couldn't talk about it anymore. And it turned out to be 100% accurate. And the world knows about it today. Okay. So that kind of stuff you have to realize, right? Yeah, Denny said, Leonard, you're blessed to have a father like that. But you picked him. I did. I'm blessed that he was here for the 19 years of my life that I had him, and that he did the job that he, looking back at himself, won't take credit for still, and still is humble enough to go, yeah, I was cool, but I wasn't that cool. That is why I chose the person, him, to be my father, and the same with my mother, and everything that is in my life. All of that was designed for me to be who it is that if I were evil and knowing what I know currently, I could pretend I am the Christ and be the Antichrist. I could take over this planet. But there are so many millions of people that are on this earth that have the same knowledge and can do the same thing. But you only get this knowledge if you're not evil. So the truth is, that because I'm unwavering and there is nothing that can tempt me to use this knowledge to get trillions of dollars, which I could easily do. And people go, why don't you use your knowledge to get freaking rich? Like, because I'm not trying to be the richest man on the earth. That would mean I have to live in the flesh. And that's actually far easier than you think. If you have the guts to be evil and to be more evil than everybody else and have the brilliance to hide so that nobody notices you until it's too late, you can take over the entire earth. Okay? But they're looking for you. They're looking for somebody who is that. That's why the person who is the Antichrist is that evil, because that person is hiding in plain sight today and is approximately my age. That's why I had people looking at me and wondering if I was. I'm not even joking you. I had religious zealots trying to determine whether I was the Antichrist or not. From the time I was 11, again, there's that number 11, until I was about 21 years of age. And then they kind of left me alone. Not kidding you. Not kidding you. I had religious groups trying to determine whether I was, in fact, the Antichrist. Because I have the mortal wound on my left forehead. I have death on my left arm. Literally have a tattoo that's covered up right now. It was the angel of death. Okay. So until I covered that up, that was a deciding factor. I was mortally wounded, like one of the horns, one of the kings was mortally wounded and should have died. I should have died when I was mortally wounded, and I did not die. And I have death on my left arm. Okay. And I am brilliant, and I have I test with the DNA, and I have everything that I need to have to be the Antichrist. According to prophecy. Born at the right time, right age, mortal wound, miracle. I was hit in the head with a golf club, and the skull was caved in and touched my brain. Any other human would have died on the scene. I was able to run home, survive that, had surgery where they shaved my head, drilled into the top of my head. I have a scar right there where my finger's in right now, right there, where they drilled into the top of my skull, and they went along the outside of my brain and pushed the skull piece fragment away from my brain and cut it out, put stitches in my head. I was released. That happened on a Sunday. I went home on Wednesday of the same week. I am on record as the fastest mortal wound head recovery in the history of the United States, if not the planet. I have gone on since then to have three other, I could say two and put up three fingers. 3 other things happened to me where I also should have died and did not. I had a cyst under my armpit that went to the size of a football with pus, where I should have been dead from the poison and didn't die. And they had to go in and suck all the juice out. And I literally healed in less than a week, less than 14 days. That entire cavity was healed up to the size of my finger at that knuckle. The doctor couldn't, and then did an x-ray to see if it was just that it had covered over and the whole cavity was still in there, because he was worried that that's what happened. And it was healed up. That doesn't happen. Well, actually, it was 4. They're telling me I forgot about the last one. Then I had a hernia surgery, right, where I herniated. I had a hernia, and it strangulated. And I was feeling kind of bad, but wasn't thinking I was dying. And when they did the math, they said I should have been dead. When I went in, they immediately got me into surgery as soon as they realized, you need to go into surgery right now. How long has this been happening to you? I'm like, since yesterday. And they're like, yesterday when? Because you have 8 hours from when it strangulates and you usually die. I showed up at the hospital more than 12 hours after it is strangulated. They thought I was going to die. The doctor told me when he went in, all my intestines were purple, gray, dying. And when he unraveled them, he expected that he was going to have to cut out most of my intestines. And as he was looking at it, they all turned freaking pink. He said they were gray, dying, and then they turned purple, and then they just turned pink while I was looking at them. He said he literally went, yes, and pumped his fist in the surgery in the operating room. When I was going into that surgery, as they put the gas on, I thought I was hallucinating. And come to find out afterwards, I'll tell you that I thought I was hallucinating. I had the gas on me, and I was starting to go cross-eyed. And then all of a sudden, I thought there was like 100 people in the room. It seemed to be a really big crowd. And I had already saw everybody that was in there. There was like 8 people doing the surgery, and all the anesthesiologists and all the people assessing the doctor. And then all of a sudden, it was really crowded in there. And I thought, wow, man, I'm tripping. And then all of a sudden, a psychic that I knew, a female, she was standing over me, looking at me and talking to me. So I focused on her, and I could understand what she was saying. And she said, Leo, are you okay? I'm here to help. I've brought help. You're being protected. They're trying to kill you. And then I went, oh, okay. And then I realized that I must have gone out because they were talking to me, or I must have said something out loud, because now I have the anesthesiologist looking over me, talking to me. So I thought I was hallucinating, and then I went out. So when I woke up in recovery and remembered that, as they were moving me back to my room, I thought, wow, that was weird that I pulled her in, and I thought that the anesthesiologist was her, and she said those things. I must be paranoid. I wasn't in my room for maybe, 10 minutes, and my phone's going off. So I reach over and I grab my phone. I still felt like shit, I look at my phone, and it's her. She's in New York. And she's like, okay, so you're back in your room. Are you okay? And I'm like, how do you know I'm back in my room? I'm in the hospital. I just had surgery. I almost died. I had hernia surgery. She goes, I know, silly. You don't remember me being there in the operating room? I said, how could you be in the operating room when you're in New York? And she goes, I am in New York. But they were trying to kill you. And I came and astral projected and brought people to protect you in the operating room and spoke to you. I'm like, I remember that, but thought that was a delusion because I was on gas. She's like, no, silly, I'm about to call you. She called me, so I knew this wasn't a dream. She called me, and I had this conversation and then checked with her later on to make sure that part wasn't a delusion. And she's like, no, I was there. They were trying to murder you, and they were using your strangulation and your surgery to kill you. And I astral projected. I was pulled in by your higher self and brought in people to stand and fight against all evil and protect you. And we stood in the operating room and kept you safe because you have work to do here. Okay. So isn't that crazy? Right. So there was other things as well where my foot. Okay. Where I ended up, because of my alcoholism 2 years ago, I ended up getting a sore on the bottom of my foot, a blister from the shoes I was wearing, and that turned into, and I didn't feel it because I have, from the other time I should have been dead, I have nerve damage in my feet, which has nothing to do with my diabetes, which I'm no longer diabetic, by the way. had COPD, and I quit smoking and healed myself. And scientists won't admit that. They're like, your lungs are perfectly almost pink and have scar tissue. So we know it's the same ones, but you don't have any COPD anymore. And they don't use an inhaler anymore because I healed that. You've regenerated, which they'll only say I'm in remission. Same thing with my diabetes. You're in remission. So I ended up with a ulcer on the bottom of my foot, and it went to the bone. So they were thinking they were going to have to amputate most of my foot, 3/4 of my foot. And I was confused because things were bad and chemically. And I didn't feel it until it was almost too late. And I went to the hospital, and they had to go in and do surgery, but they had to keep me and keep checking on my foot because they said, even if we do x-rays, we have to test the bone to see if that ulcer got into the bone, because if it did, then we have to cut off your foot, because otherwise it's going to open up into the marrow, and the marrow is going to get into your blood and you're going to die anyways. And so I was like, I'm not losing my foot. So I had a surgery every freaking day on my foot. They had to go in and check the bone, but I didn't know why they kept going in and not just x-raying the bone. And on the sixth day, there's the number, on the sixth day, and every day I had a different doctor come in. And at first I just thought it was whoever was on duty, but the doctor never came back, and I never saw the doctor again. So then I started questioning, and they were like, that doctor doesn't work in the ER. And I was like, well, that's weird. What's going on with, who are these doctors that I keep getting a different doctor every day? So finally on the sixth day, this female doctor came in, and she was, she actually started talking to me, and she said, okay, so there's something that's going on that's very odd with you. And they finally called me. And the reason I'm here is because I'm a scientist. And I was like, so who were all these other doctors? All of them were going up the chain of scientists until they had me. And I'm coming in to take a look, and I see something that's going on with your foot. and I'm going to take a picture of it and I want to show it to you and I'm going to ask you a question about it. And I said, okay. And she said, all right, so first let me show you a picture of how it looks when somebody has the same wound that you have that's an ulcer on their foot, and explain to you how the physiology of how that happens. When you get an ulcer, it goes down if it gets near the bone, or in any case it's going down. As it heals, and the human body heals from the inside up. So the ulcer is supposed to heal from the center, and then it moves slowly forward. As the hole closes up around it, it gets shallower and shallower. I said, okay. And she said, and this is what it looks like. And she showed me a picture of it. And I said, okay. And she said, this is what your foot looks like. And she showed me inside, and I had these tentacles like octopus arms that were sticking out in all directions from the inside of the wound on the walls of my skin going down to the bottom. And she says, every person who has come in here to check on your foot has seen these, and they've cut them all out each day and then repacked your foot. And the next day when they came in, they had another doctor come in and they were there again. So they cut them out and repacked your foot. And the next day, and each time they kept saying, did you see this weird thing that's going on? And that has been happening over and over and over every single day. And I said, okay. And she said, I said, have you looked at my chart? She says, yes, you have several cases in your life where you have miraculously healed from wounds, including mortal wounds, to where you shouldn't have lived. She said, and in the last 5 years, the last 10 years, you've had 3 events where you should have died. You've had poison in your body that should have taken your legs and should have killed you, and you survived that, and you still have your legs. Then you had a cyst in your armpit that they gave you a 3% chance of surviving and a 5% chance after surgery of surviving, and you miraculously healed in less than 14 days. And I said, yes. And she said, this is a picture, and she showed me the tentacles. She said, that is not normal for the human, any human. She said to me, are you an alien or are you a robot? And she wasn't kidding when she said that. And everybody else that was in there with her was like, ha, ha, ha. And then they were kind of like, is she serious? And she looked at me, and everybody looked at me, and I said, a little bit of both, but that's classified. She did not waver. That did not surprise her. She said, this is normal for you, isn't it? And I said, yes. She said, you heal way faster than anyone else. She said, do you have enhancements? And I said, I believe so. I said, I'm a Reiki master teacher, if that helps. And I said, and I use magic, if that helps. And she goes, a little, but I think there's something else. And I said, well, I've been told that I have a very good DNA. And she was like, yeah, better than 99% of the people. She says, I'm going to tell them that this is normal for you and that you're okay, and we're going to end up discharging you and let you go home. I said, so I've been kept here the entire time because nobody understood what was happening to me. She says, this doesn't happen. I've never seen it. She goes, are you okay with me keeping these pictures? And I said, absolutely. I said, and if you have any other questions later in life, you can call me up and keep my number. And you can call me, contact me, and I'll answer as best that I know. I said, have you looked at my father's DNA and my father? And she said, should I? And I said, he had an extra heart ventricle in his heart, and that's less than 10% of the population of the earth. And I said, and he was really strong for a person who only weighed $105. Like he weighed about 140 pounds, 135 at his biggest. But he could lift up a car. And I said, I don't believe I have that. I've been tested, but one of my sisters does. I said, but I have type O negative DNA. And she's like, okay, well, I don't know if that'll help, but she goes, that's really cool. This is just insane. And I said, you can do whatever you want with it. I said, but we're out there. Right. Okay. So I'm not saying this because I'm thinking I'm cool. I'm saying this because I didn't realize that. And I have other wounds that also have healed in crazy fast fashions. All of that was designed. I'm not saying physically my physical body is an alien, though I do believe that I do have enhancements from the local government. So I do believe that I have all the earmarks of going on a 20 and back, and I haven't unlocked that memory yet, but it's not important to me. So people are like, why don't you unlock that? I'm like, because it's not actually important to me to look. If I wanted to, I probably could. So I do believe that because I've seen the eyes of other super soldiers that are literally coming out and saying they are, and I know them. I look into their eyes and I go, I know that person. I know that person. I've seen them before and worked with them. So, and then when I heard about their stories, I'm like, I know that, and I've done that, and I have that, and I have all the earmarks. So I don't know for certain if that is what is my DNA, or if the DNA is what was designed into this body because of how I designed it, or all of the above. None of that is important to my mission. So as long as I stay alive and I'm like, what's his name from the X-Men, right? To where I heal as fast as I do, I'm okay with that because it's kept me alive. Because I've gone through some shit where people have tried to kill me, where I should be dead, and I didn't die, and I've survived those things, and I've survived that, and I'm grateful for that. So if it was an enhancement that was given to me in the physical life, and they did recruit me for the Star League to defend the frontier against Zur and the Kodan Armada, and I went on a 20 and back, then they helped me, and then obviously I was letting them do that so that I would have these enhancements to keep me alive as time went on. I don't know the answer to that question. Okay, so whether you believe it or not is I tell these things now because I'm no longer afraid, because when you read my book, all of this is going to come out anyways, and I didn't want to put it in there, so I put it at the very end of the book because I'll lose all those people who are not going to believe me anyways, and only the people get the Easter eggs at the end. We'll get to hear it. So I'm not telling you this because I'm trying to convince you of anything. I'm telling you this because there are some of you that are out there who haven't unlocked these abilities. I was just literally reading. I don't have it in front of me because it's over where I was sitting next to my chair. A book called The God-Man, or called God-Man. The Bible turned to flesh or put to flesh, something like that. God-Man. You should look that up. I'm reading that, and it literally, everything that I've said, including talking about the Christos, is in that book. And so when I'm reading that, I'm like, wow, okay, so all the stuff that it's good validation that there are other people out there and that was just published, I believe, in 2022. I was unaware of that. I thought it was published a long time ago. And I looked while I was reading, I was like, when did they write this? And I believe it was just in 2022, the copy I have, but this copy is not the complete one because they reference diagrams that are not in the book. See diagram A, and there is no diagram A. But then other times there's a diagram. So there's some diagrams that were removed. So I think this is a second edition or something where they condensed their information, because this is only about 160 or 70 pages long in and of itself. Again, they were trying to give you as much information, and it's all about the Bible, and they're trying to unlock the Bible code without saying it. Nowhere in there do they say that, but I see that's what they're trying to do for you, is show you all the things in the Bible and the representation in the physical. Because when a lot of people say Jesus Christ never existed and that the Romans invented Jesus to control the Jews. And I'm like, well, they did a very lousy job at that if they were trying to do that, because it's outlived the Roman Empire by 1,000 years. Right? And literally the information that is the Christ is literally what was being taught. So I don't believe that the Romans invented that. I believe that was a personification that happened in the physical. Because if you say that Jesus was invented, then you have to say that every single cycle in the cyclical nature of the Jesus character that goes backwards in time also had to be invented. And all of those were just the same information being told by people in the past over and over. And so you have to realize that as above, so below, as within, so without, that literally whatever happens in the spiritual has to have a manifestation in this physical place. Okay, so again, so when the modus operandi of the Orion Crusaders, when they got here in the third and fourth dimension, they had to come down. Some of them had to have boots on the ground in the third dimension. That unlocked access to the fourth dimensional past, present, and future, as well as the third dimensional past, present, and future, the density as well as the dimension. So then they went backwards in time and shifted things to take away everything. And there was a 0 point, and then everything after that is future, and future wanes. So we have already gone past their present when they got here and when they left. This is what I don't explain that in the book, but I'm going to explain it in the second book, which will be out in a couple of years. What I'm telling you now, so you guys are getting some information that you may not remember, but it'll be out in the next book about the temporal war and about the timeline. So literally the reason that the devil shall rule the earth for a time, and then I tell people that time is already ended, because the 0 point of when they got here is going to be when their influence is at the highest peak. Do you see? Do you understand that? So when they got here and they took over the earth, they went backwards in time and planted the seeds of to solidify them being here at the time when they were physically here. And that gives them access to the future as well. The problem is that once they're physically removed from this plane, all of everything that is in their future window stops being written further and further into the future because they're no longer on this world anymore. So the second that they disappear, it's just like if I die today, my memory eventually will fade and go out of existence of people remembering who I am, because they'll all grow old and die. Do you see? They'll also leave the earth. So the memory, physical memory of knowing who I am will fade from the earth, and no one will remember me physically knowing me. However, if I leave books and files like this for in the ether for the podcast, that will outlive me. That will stay here because I'm doing it in the third dimension, in the physical plane, and creating it in the physical plane. And that means that it has a past, a present, and a future. And it continues to go on in the future because it is made up of the place of doing, in the place of doing, for the people in the place of doing. Just like the monument, like the pyramid, which they talk about in there being a representation of the human mind, of the same rise and fall of the Christos, the Adam and the Eve, or the Adam man, or the Jesus being crucified and resurrecting and going and becoming the light of the world with the king's chamber, the queen's chamber, and all of that, which no one wants to talk about in the pyramids because they want to say that the sarcophagus was designed for a king to go into, but it's literally supposed to be the third eye, which plays more into what Ra talks about the pyramid being. And that when you go in there, you can either heal people or it helps you to ascend. Okay, that's why I bring that to full circle. But they don't talk about that or the law of one at all. They talk about the pyramid, and they talk about it having to do with the ascension oil and the ascension of the human condition, and physically a physical representation of the physiological brain and the psyche of the soul and the ascension process. But they don't make the correlation to Ra and the law of one, so far as I found. But I'm only just past halfway in the book. But I don't believe they go back and talk about the pyramids because they do things in short, choppy, sometimes one paragraph of a chapter. So literally, see, now I'm going to a place where they're throwing me off track, so I apologize for that. So literally, to get back on point, if you're going to say that Jesus was created by the Romans to control people, then every person that has been that hero character, that savior character throughout all of time would have to have also been created. Evil people, secularists, will tell you, of course, because all religions are fake. It was just made up. Because everything that is a personification of what they're about is controlling other people. So they judge things the way they would be. So religions, first of all, spiritual can't exist in their world because there is nothing. They can't have you believing there is anything because they have to have you believing that there is only this one place and you only have one life. And in this one, you're a slave and I'm in control. That's what they have to have you believe. So they have to tell you, and they have to defy, not just say religion isn't real or God isn't real. They have to defy that. That's why when that guy back in the day here in the United States was trying to get suing because his son was being forced to be the Pledge of Allegiance because they say one nation under God, and he was trying to get that removed from everywhere in the United States. When he was in court, he didn't say, I don't believe in your God. He said, I defy your God. Now, remember that, specifically reading that about his testimony in court, and went, well, that tells you everything that you need to know if you're awake, that he's evil. And his motivation is not him worried about his son. He's using his son as a pawn and using that to say, my poor little child is being indoctrinated by your evil ways. When in fact, he's trying to remove the words God from everyone saying it every day, that one nation under God. in the United States through the Pledge of Allegiance. And they moved away from that after that didn't work. And now they're just suing to get the Pledge of Allegiance, saying it's indoctrination. No longer religious indoctrination, just indoctrination, because everyone is having to pledge their allegiance. They're being brainwashed from birth. Meanwhile, they're brainwashing your kids to where if you're a boy, you're really a girl, Bobby. And if you're a girl, Jenny, you're really a boy. And they're having, literally here in the United States, they had trans book readings in the library to 4-year-old kids. The same trans guy dressed as a woman who would be murdered if he left this country was teaching them, if you're happy and you know it, say Free Palestine, and teaching the kids to sing that song on video, saw it on the news. Okay. So literally reading to the kids and teaching them the song, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands, changing the clap your hands to, if you're happy and you know it, say Free Palestine. Palestine should be free. And teaching all the kids, brainwashing them, that's okay. Brainwashing them that they're supposed to be the opposite gender is okay. And teaching them not that it's okay to be the normal gender that you are. Nope, can't teach them that. But yet it's indoctrination to make the kids stand up and say, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. That's wrong. We need to get rid of that. But we want to have this guy who is not a real woman dress up as a woman and indoctrinate the kids to be anti-Israel and free Palestine. That's completely okay. There's nothing wrong with that kind of indoctrination. But this other one's indoctrination, right? So you have to pay attention to what they're doing, guys. They're doing it to literally, if you go back in the Bible, let's go to the Christian Bible again, in the New Testament and in the Old Testament, there's passages in there, and I don't have them memorized to quote them because it's not my job. I'm not trying to be a priest, right? Even though I could because I have the title, I have the license. But there's passages in there that talk about the future. Thousands of years in the future when men will be like women and women will be like men. You should look that up. It's in the Bible. It's in the New Testament. It's in the Old Testament too, but in the New Testament as well. Okay. It didn't mean anything for 1,000 years. Everyone thought it just meant people being gay. And then all of a sudden, in the last 20 years, it's meaning people are actually having surgery and dressing and acting the other way. And now they're indoctrinating people into teaching them that. I'm not saying that if you're born that you think that you're gay, that's wrong and you should be put to death like the Sharia law would the same Palestinians would kill you over. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that people aren't born misgendered. I'm not saying that. They asked Ra that question 40 years ago. And Ra's answer was, because there's so many people that are on the planet, and because there's so many people that have been on this planet for so long, stuck in a cycle because they didn't ascend the way they were supposed to and move on, they've been stuck recycling over and over and over and over. When they come through, and this goes back to what Kevin was saying earlier about mental illness, when they come through, they're confused. And if you're born into a population center where there's 100 million people or 1 million people in one city, like if you're in New York, there's 5 million people, there's going to be more people in there that are going to come through misgendered than not. Because what happens is you've designed your life to be a man or a woman. And when you come in and you come in a very populated place and you're born in a hospital with say 500 kids all born on the same day, what happens is that some people get confused. And so then what they do is they revert back to the imprint of what am I, a boy or a girl mostly. I've been a boy more than I've been a girl, so I'm going to come through as a boy. Well, if you're physically a boy, then nothing changes. But if you're physically a girl, now you're coming through and you're going to be misgendered, and it's not your fault. You chose to become through misgendered. So is some of that working into play now where people are coming through on purpose to do that? Yes. So some people are designing now because everything you can think of becomes a possibility. So some people are now coming through in the physical male body that are going to be females. And some of those people will or will not transition. Okay. I have questions about that I don't understand, where like with somebody who comes through in the male body and they say, no, I'm supposed to be a female. So they transition, whether they have the surgery or not, and they start dressing and acting like a female. And then they marry a female. That's kind of confusing, because wouldn't that suggest that, well, then you're actually a man? Or now is it the misgender has gone even further to say, not only did I come through in a physical male body and I should have been a female, and so I'm going to be a female, but I was also coming through as a female lesbian who liked women. Because that's what's happening. And the same thing the other way around. Okay. To where people are coming in and they're acting and dressing and saying transition from a male to a female, getting the surgery, but then now they're marrying women because they're attracted to women. Well, then shouldn't you have just stayed the man then because you're attracted to women? Or is that a category and subcategory again to where it's, well, no, I was actually supposed to come in as a gay woman, but I physically came in as a man and I'm still actually a gay woman? Well, that's possible too. I'm not going to look at that, but anything that we can create in nature is going to become a thing. So the longer that stays a thing, and this is what they know this is why I say this. So that's confusing enough for me. Is it confusing for the people that are coming through? But everything becomes the norm that we can think of. So if we create that and keep that, it becomes more normal. Not just because people get used to it, but then people start choosing it as they come in. Do you see that? So the evil people know that, and that's why they're trying to get people confused with the genders on purpose, because they know that other people will start coming through to have that experience, because it's a new experience now. It's not the same old experience. So now that goes back to the cyclical nature of the universe. This is happening because it's supposed to happen, because it's inevitable that it's going to happen. Because people have been here so long that things are now blending on a physical, because they've blended on a spiritual, because everybody's been stuck here. It's the warping and the slow degradation and destruction of this populace. Because of, say this planet was locked and there was only the DNA that's on here long enough, if we don't all ascend, we're all going to be corrupted. Our DNA is going to be too close. If you look at people that grew up on islands and lived on islands, their DNA looks too similar. If you look at people that come from the island of Tonga or the island of, the Pacific Islanders, I'm not just picking on the Tongans, but some of them, Fijians and stuff like that. If you look at the natives that came from there, Samoans, especially here in the United States, Samoans look a little too close to one another until they started getting onto the mainland and breeding with people. And there was a time that the Irish were kind of looking like that and getting a little what we'd call, mugwumpy. So all groups of people, when they're isolated, they become too interbred. So if everybody's stuck on this planet too long, is my point, eventually, like now, people are going to be breeding with everyone from every possible scenario. So if you lower the amount of DNA that's available, you will also lower the amount of differences, until eventually all of those differences become personified, and then it starts causing problems. It's the same with family members having children. If you only have children with families, this is why Adam and Eve couldn't be the only humans on the face of the earth, because if they were, then that meant Adam was having sex with his daughters, and Eve had to have been having sex with her sons, and then Adam had to have sex with his granddaughters, and Eve had to have sex with her granddaughters, and then everybody had to interbreed with everybody else. You cannot create an entire species from only 2 genetic codes. It's been proven through science. You need a minimum of 7, and for it to work perfectly, 14. 2 by 2. Does that sound familiar to you? 2 by 2. You have to have a man and a woman from each genetic pool, and you have to have 14 of those genetic pools with a man and a woman from each minimum to create an entire society and let it grow to be 8 billion people without degradation. But that's just the minimum. And that's truly, if you look at that, it won't surely survive to be that many people. It'll survive to be about half of that. So you have to have an influx of DNA larger than that to have a planet this size that we have. Okay. And do we look in history and find that DNA started popping up here spontaneously? Yeah. people, the DNA that is type O on this earth is only 10,000 years of age, positive and negative. 10,000 years ago, that DNA was introduced. So somebody came here from outside of this ecosystem with that DNA 10,000 years ago. So when you look back, you can trace how many DNAs go back, how far, and do they drop off at certain places. Science is now starting to look at that and say, how old are these actual races and how far back do they go? Were they all created at the same time? We know that at least the type O DNA, that bloodline, that DNA, is only 10,000 years old, positive and negative. Okay, negative now, it just means that it still hasn't been blended with the positive of any other species, especially the African. That's what it means. Type O negative means that you have no African DNA. So that means that all of your DNA from all of your family line never was bred with in any way somebody who had the DNA from Africa. That's going to change eventually because people are going to be breeding with everybody across the earth. So eventually people who have the negative DNA are going to breed with people from Africa and pick up that DNA in their children. That'll eventually happen. And they're making it blend in by anyone who has type O negative, especially type O negative, has a problem with breeding with anyone else on this earth. So the women have to take medicine so that their physiological DNA won't murder their own and they won't have a fetus, and they won't have a miscarriage. And women who are not, and their husband is type O negative, they have to take pills because otherwise the fetus tries to kill the mother DNA. Type O negative DNA is very aggressive and only wants to breed with itself. I have type O negative blood. I am the universal donor. I can give my blood to anyone, but I can only receive type O or type O negative blood. It will kill me if you put anybody else's blood in me, but my blood can go into anyone. Okay. That only got here 10,000 years ago. That was a definitive last time that there's been a new change. We haven't discovered anything else that got here less than that. Okay. So the point of that is a physical representation of someone, a race of people that got here on the earth that had to have a physical representation. Okay. I know that was the Patal. I know that was us. We're referred to as the Patal. Those of us who came from Orion, chasing the Orion Crusaders, came down here and got boots on the ground. And those of us who are still here mopping up this problem that they created here. It was already kind of starting because it's part of the ecosystem anyways. But they got here and were able to corrupt it. Those of us who showed up have that. We don't all have that DNA, but that DNA is represented here because of those people coming here to defeat the Anunnaki. The Orion Crusaders. Their DNA is here too, but I'm not going to talk about which one is theirs. Okay, their DNA is also here. Some of you instinctively heard in your head who that belongs to when I said that. You're listening to my voice. And I know that because I also got an image in my head of who that is. Okay, so that will tell you who the Crusaders, but it's not, you're going to get a physical description, but that physical description is representation. It doesn't mean that the Orion Crusaders were in fact only that specific race or those couple of races that you're thinking of, because that's a representation that is a standard average, just like the Patal standard average would be the Viking DNA. That is the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan race that everybody wants to say are all a bunch of racist because the Nazis were racist. But it's not just that DNA, because the Viking DNA is many other blended DNAs. But the type O negative specifically goes to that Aryan race that is part of the Viking DNA. That only goes 10,000 years, but that doesn't mean that all people who have that DNA are good people, because they're not. It just means that it's available for anybody to be in that body type, and they can choose to be good or evil. So if you're going to find people that have type O negative DNA or a negative factor, AB negative, B negative, that are good and evil, because once it's here, it's free for anyone to access. But the actual access point of when that got here was when an entire species got here. So that's why I say in my book, and I don't give you the date, but I tell you because it's there for you to look up, there's a definitive timeline in the past that is as far reaching as they can go backwards in time. You'll find that it was very close to the same timeline that the Vikings have, even though the DNA got here 10,000 years ago, you're going to see that the representation of those people go back further, because you're supposed to have a past, a present, and a future when you get boots on the ground. So you're going to find that somewhere in the past, more than 10,000 years ago, and in the future, okay, you're going to find that the 0 point, the equilibrium between the same distance in past and future, that one point, which I'll get into more details in my second book, is a definitive place in the past that you can calculate, that scientists are now starting to get onto. So if you Google that and go, when did everything change on this earth, you'll find that it was a set point. That set point is the furthest reach into the past that they could possibly go backwards and change when they got here. So you're going to find, and for those of you who can do the math and know about the temporal war, I tell you about the physical representation of the Patal 10,000 years ago as the furthest reach back in time we needed to go to fix what's going on now, that the Anunnaki, the Orion Crusaders, got here prior to us, which means their reach is going to be further back than 10,000 years ago. Okay? So you're going to find that it was more than 10,000 years ago when it started happening in the past to have the control, but you're also going to find that our reach is going to outlive them in the future more than 10,000 years from now, because they got here before we did and left before we, because some of us are still here. So we keep going into the future. Theirs stops. The devil shall reign the earth for a time. That time has already ended, but their reach is still in the timeline, because when they got here and they went backwards in time more than 10,000 years, which means they go forward in time, same distance. That doesn't mean it's going to be 10,000 years into the future. But Alex Coulier tells of a story of when the Andromedans came here and said, 8,000 years into the future, this evil in the universe reached us. And we were tracing it back in time to try and figure out when it is or where it came from. And we traced it to the earth. They didn't say we traced it to backwards in time to now, but they did. They said 8,000 years in the future. And we've come here now. Okay. And that was in the 1980s or the 90s when he was communicating with them back then. He talked about that since then all the way up till now. Okay. But when they told him that, that was 40 years ago, around the same time Ra was communicating, saying that 8,000 years in the future from 40 years ago, they saw this residual of this evil and they traced it to Earth as the 0 point. But they didn't say we've come backwards in time 8,000 years to get here. They didn't say they didn't. So if they in fact did go backwards in time to the 0 point, then that would suggest that the 0 point was somewhere in the vicinity of the last 1,000 years. Or, moreover, 1938, perhaps. Okay? So if that were the case, and they came back, and the closest they could go backwards in time, remember, when you're outside of time, you can't calculate. Ra talks about that. Can't calculate time exact. Maybe they came back here to the 80s, and it was really 50 years earlier when they were supposed to be here, when the 0 point was. And the closest they could calculate it was 1985, when it should have been 1938, or 1988, when it should have been 38. Okay, so that will give you a little bit of the timeline of possibility for when the Anunnaki had their reach, which I believe was they got here in 1938 and they left by 1947. Okay, because if our DNA is only 10,000 years old, that would suggest that we got here probably about 1946, 48. Okay. And then that goes into the timeline of when Errol was here, was in 1948, Roswell, and she was explaining about this group of people who she came here with that were marauders who have left from the earth already and were heading into the center of the universe trying to take it over. Okay. So they got here, occupied as much as information as they could from the past, got all the materials they needed and weapons that they needed in about a 10-year time period from our perspective, and then left the solar system, but left people in charge here and said, we'll come back for a tithing, and changed everything in the past. Okay, so that means they got here about 12,000 years ago. See, now I'm giving you the information because they're allowing me to, but a minute ago I had to try to allude to it. For some reason, because I said what I said first, maybe because they wanted me to make sure I gave you that information. So about 12,000 years ago, they got here, and about 10,000 years ago, we showed up to kick their ass, which means that they got here truly by the universal timeline in 1938, and we got here in 1948. I was born in 1967 in this life, but I've been here a lot longer than that. Why? Because of the way time works. You guys just don't get that. So I've been here a lot longer than 10,000 years. That's the residual of that. But the spirit goes back further, but only in the fourth dimension could they change that. So there is changes. And this is why it goes back to the 75,000 year mark, which is the definitive mark when people of the other culture were telling about this culture, telling us in the future, and set in motion all of these prophecies that have been retold throughout all of time 12 times, 12 generations, down through the ages. We're looking at 75,000 year cycles, 75,000 years in a 145,000 year cycle. Okay, so that means that they came here in two different waves, not just the one that would have them physically on the ground in 1938. This might be really confusing for those of you right now. You're probably asking questions like Jan is asking a question. Now that can get confusing, right? So, right, and Peter talking about that too. So I don't know if you're referring to me when you said that. That could get confusing. I know of one who's done that, had to opt to change from a man to a woman. Oh, you were talking about that. Okay. So, that gets confusing. So you weren't referring to what I was talking about now, but it looked like you were in the beginning. So literally what you have to realize is that in the temporal war, is that when you move outside of our perspective is the only place, the first, the second, and the third dimension where time works this way, where there is time, past, present, and future separation. If they came here in more than one cycle, there's going to be an entire societies. I believe that they were here. I know that they were here, now that I'm looking, for 144,000 years, 145,000 years. But they weren't here the entire time. So 75,000 years ago, part of them got here in a guise, and that changed the course of history, and that gave them that duality of 75,000 years beyond that till now. Okay. 0.75,000 years ago gives them 75,000 years of occupation and residual memory of them, and 75,000 years the other direction. They got here in 1938. That gives them another residual from 1938 backwards in time. Okay. And depending on how they got here and how strong they were, they could go back 10,000 years, like the Patal getting here in 1948. Okay, so there was another influx, another wave. Arrow kind of alludes to that. You should go back in my archives. I don't think you can listen to them on MP3 file because I don't know if I have them all there. I'll have to look. I might. And if not, can't go on YouTube anymore. They deleted them all 2 years ago. You can go on Facebook to Orion Rising, the page. If you go to the group, it's my group, but it doesn't have archives there. But the page I've broadcast on there, so you can go to the page and go backwards. And all 23 episodes are there when I talked about that in 1948 and the CIA and the federal government and the military of the United States interviewing this alien through telepathy that they claim didn't happen. But yet there's records of it, right? And that I got copies of that. And how that correlates. And the reason when I read that, the reason I did that is because I knew that it correlated to what was going on in the raw material and what I know about the temporal war, separate from all of that information that I already knew about. They knew that they were still talking about it. So either people in 1948 knew about the temporal war and they were making up the same shit that the people then in 1984, 81 to 84, knew about, and they were making shit up about the raw thing, and that goes backwards in time, and that you go back anywhere in time to any of the religions, and they're making up the same shit. Okay, so either it's all made up, and everybody's been doing that, and that's one of the theories that they tell you, that all of this is all made up on purpose to confuse us even more. You got to love how people will tell a little truth with many lies, because they need to get you convinced that then this is real by misinformation and disinformation, or it's all right. Okay. So how is it that people 75,000 years ago were discovering the same information that people not reading any religion today, not reading any mythology today, not knowing any of that stuff and not having anything to do with any of that, or unlocking the same information in their brains, the same access to the same knowledge today? How is that possible? Oh, DNA memory. Now it's okay to have DNA memory. Do you see? Oh, it's just pre-programming. Oh, so that goes to God created that now. No, there is no God. Well, then how can you have DNA programming without having a creator to create all that? Somebody had to put that in the DNA. Didn't spontaneously happen. And so then they have to come up with theories that that's what all animals are designed that way, because the nature designed them that way so that they would survive. And we humans are just animals. And so, okay, so who designed nature then? It just evolved that way, and that to live, it had to adapt. And so it somehow knew that it was dying and had to then become adaptive and realize that I have to pass on DNA. So then they're like, well, chaos theory. And I'm like, oh, so now you have a theory as to something sentient in DNA that is above and beyond, that realizes its own worth and doesn't want to die, and so it has to pass on memory in its own DNA, not just verbal memories that are taught to people. No, never mind all that. It's just because some people thought those things and were started teaching those things, it became, so it's like muscle memory then, to where your body won't know that it needs to work out and get stronger until you start doing it, and then you discover on your own that moving a certain way will make you stronger, but our bodies aren't designed to already do that. That becomes a cyclical nature argument that doesn't make any sense, because you're saying it didn't happen on its own, but it had to happen on its own, and that the reason it happened on its own was no matter what, you can't get away from, there had to be something that was sentient that made the decision to cause the causality that everything else had to react to. No matter how much you try to explain that away and use double talk and double speak, all of your theories are based on some sentientness, cohesive will to survive that is inherent in everything. To make changes to yourself on a molecular level to ensure propagation and longevity of a species. What triggered that? Okay. Something had to be triggered for that to trigger. So again, there's a causality and causation without a causation. Can't have that. Can't. So that's when people go, well, that's why we made it up. Because if God didn't exist, we made up God. Because that explains everything and puts it into a small little box and makes it perfect, and then you can feel good about yourself. Then why do you keep trying to tell me I'm wrong? If you're okay with that, let me believe it then. Why is it necessary for you to keep saying, I know it's not that. Can't be that. I know it's something else. Okay, so have you ever figured it out in 100,000 years? No, but we're getting there. Okay, that's what they said 100,000 years ago. Nothing's changed. You're just a new one doing it. Yet, everyone discovers the same thing, that, oh, wait, there is an ultimate creator. Not because we're saying there has to be one. Not because I want there to be one. Because what happens is when you learn and get away from living in the flesh, everyone gets the same knowledge, same skill set. Just saying. Okay, let's play another question here, and then I got to go. So I'm going to put it raw again. so I can figure out exactly where we are to make because we only had a few questions in. So I apologize for anybody that got mad at me because I was talking without playing raw, because some people get really offended because I'm talking from me instead of from raw. I tuned in here raw. Okay, then read the books. That was 40 years ago when raw couldn't tell you anything other than what you could know 40 years ago. So if you want to know what raw is telling you, it's good stuff. But raw can only tell you what you can know 40 years ago. I'm telling you what you can know now.
We shall respond in an attempt to clarify your query. The vibratory rates are not to be understood as the same in positive and negative orientations. They are to be understood as having the power to accept and work with intelligent infinity to a certain degree or intensity. Due to the fact that the primary color, shall we say, or energy blue is missing from the negatively oriented system of power, the green/blue vibratory energies are not seen in the vibratory schedules or patterns of negative fourth and fifth rates of vibration. The positive, upon the other hand, shall we say, has the full spectrum of true color time/space vibratory patterns and thus contains a variant vibratory pattern or schedule.
And that was, Rick, I wasn't suggesting that any of you were. That was for naysayers that might be out there in the world listening to the show who made it this far, which I don't believe that there'd be anybody there. So yeah, Rick just said, I'm sure that none of us are saying that, Leo. No, I know you're not. I know you're not, but I'm saying some of the naysayers who pop in and out and only hear portions of this and run away quickly because they're get offended by that. Oh, wait a minute. I was here to listen to the law of one, and I haven't even said anything from raw. What does this got to do with the law of one? Well, if you actually read the law of one or listened to the law of one, you would know what that has to do with it. That's why I say, so I wasn't suggesting that anybody that's currently going to be staying here still would know that. Most people are already gone that would be saying that, and anybody who happened to pop in right then might say that about if they lasted long enough. That's what I was saying. Okay, let's continue.
Each is capable of doing fourth density work. This is the criterion for harvest. 47.4 questioner, did you say that blue was missing from fourth density negative? Raw, I am raw. Let us clarify further. As we have previously stated, all beings have the potential for all possible vibratory rates. Thus the potential of the green and blue energy center activation is, of course, precisely where it must be in a creation of love. However, the negatively polarized entity will have achieved harvest due to extremely efficient use of red and yellow/orange, moving directly to the gateway indigo, bringing through this intelligent energy channel the INS tearemings of intelligent infinity. 47.5 questioner, then it...
Okay, we'll stop there. So we only got 4 questions in this week, but that's okay because the information was better information anyways, because you guys were asking questions. As we go forward, you'll see that I'm going to transition away from playing the law of one, and I'll be talking, and we'll do that. And I'll have a producer, I'll have a co-host that will be there to monitor as we go, and then you'll see me on other people's shows as my book gets popular and people are going to be having me on their shows, and I'll be doing that and talking there. So once we get and hopefully we'll be transitioning and getting the platform up where we're going to be bringing people in anyways to then show other people how they can make the changes. What are you doing or what can I do? So hopefully we'll get that up as well. So you guys will be able to then pop in, and I'll still be going live to talk, but I'll have to have somebody to make sure that I see your questions in the chat, or you guys will, or I'll have to be leaving my glasses on and do this. And, you know what I mean? Look over my glasses while I'm talking to you, and then look down my glasses, get maybe the half glasses, right? Or sit more like Santa Claus to where I look at you guys over them and then do that. If I do that, it'll work easier for me. But then, I look like, Santa Claus looking over my glasses at you to read the chat too, right? So we'll figure that out. I'll either still do it myself and do that and just wear my glasses on the bridge of my nose and look up and down, right? Or I'll have a co-host who will be going, so-and-so is asking this. And then I'll be able to answer that and then move on. And then you guys can we can do question and answer sessions. I would prefer to do that more than playing the law of one at this point, because unless you've never learned anything about the law of one, but I use that as a reference to leap off from, right? But I can do that with anything. I can just come on and go live and just start talking and answer questions. But you guys then have to do some work. right? And start thinking of questions of what you want to know about and then ask them, right? And because I work with you guys off when I'm not live, a lot of you that are in the audience, you have access to me and you ask me questions and I answer and work with you. I guess when I become more popular, I'll have less time for that. So I'll have to make sure that I do continue doing lives to be able to answer those questions, but I still try to do as much as I can to answer those questions when I can. To try and help guide you guys and work with you individually and give you guys more of my time, which is what I try to do now. I was doing that literally before I came live while I was sitting here waiting to go live. And then I was like, gotta go live like now, right? To get on here today. Okay. All right. So I love you guys. Have a great night. We'll pick up on session 47, question 5 next Friday. And then, like I said, if you guys have any questions and you're out there in the world, and you're listening on MP3 or on X or Twitter, those questions filter in here when I'm live. So you guys will have to ask me the questions individually. You guys can get a hold of me by looking me up on Messenger, and soon I'll have a platform. We'll have a platform that you guys will I'll be able to have you go to once we get that platform up, which is what we're working on for this year going forward. So we'll see how that turns out, and hopefully we can get that up for you this year, to where then I can say, send me a message here, and either myself or other people will be able to work with you. So we're trying to do that and get people dedicated to be able to do that work and help people. Right now, everybody's still doing their own things in life, and because of that, we all have to make our own way, which means that we all have to. We can't help you as much as we want to until we no longer need to have outside jobs so that we can focus more. And once we do that and get the nonprofit up, then we can take donations and have it pay for itself. And then we can actually do more work readily because we won't be forced to have to do other jobs and limit our access to people. And then we can create events where we have a lot of people and be able to do that from there. We'll start doing that. So we know that that's the transition of where we're going. We just haven't gotten it all up and operational yet. And we're waiting for a few things to come into play currently to where we can get that going. But we've already discussed it behind the scenes and we're working on it. So know that. And those of you who are out there listening who know that you're a part of that because you've been a part of those conversations, you know what I'm talking about. So we are still working on it. It's just taking a little bit of time for us because this is the place of doing and time does exist here. And evil people make us jump through a lot of freaking hoops. So we're trying to work on how we can do it without them realizing what we're about to stifle us as much, because they'll stifle us more if they know who we are and what we're about. So we're still trying to do that and create the platform, knowing that they can't stop us once we get it rolling. But there's certain hoops that we have to jump through in every country to get ourselves on the air in all countries. Each country makes us jump through another hoop for their region, their country. So that creates issues for us. So we can broadcast in places where the companies are already doing it. And that's what we're doing to minimize the world and make it smaller by doing like Facebook and podcasts and YouTube and Twitter and those that have a reach worldwide to far more people in the world that you guys can listen to us. We're already accessing those and we're trying to consolidate that stuff onto our own servers. You'll see us create that as time goes on, because if you're on their platforms and you become super popular and you don't let them control you, they cut you off. So I'm already that mastermind looking at these are the things we're going to need in the future. I've always been a planner that way. I'm a Virgo. I've always been a planner that way. So I know that we're going to need our own servers and we're going to need our own platforms, our own websites, because as soon as you got your own server, they cut you off of their websites, and the countries will then try to cut you off from their countries. So we're going to create things to where we can get in there to where they can't do that. And money talks. The currency of the realm is currency. Money is the currency of the realm of this earth. So we know that even these people who are evil, they can't resist enough money. So when we have unlimited money, which we will have eventually, we will have that. When we have unlimited money, we'll just pay them off. That's what they want anyways. And then they'll allow it. They're going to allow their own demise because of their own gluttony. Their own gluttony is going to cause their own demise because they can't help themselves because they're greedy. Their own greed for money and power. We're not going to give them the power, but we're going to give them the money. And that's, and that's going to unlock everything, and they won't be able to help themselves because somebody in evil will go against what everybody else in evil wants, and they'll go, I'll have more money than you, so I'll be able to take control. So I'm doing it, and they'll take that money and try to use it for evil. That's the problem that most light workers have, is they know we're giving money out. We have to give money to evil people who do evil shit with the money we give them, and that doesn't taste good to them. But they have to realize and get above that in their development and go, that's what you need to do. Gluttony feeds. You have to feed them gluttonous things. No one learns from gluttony until they almost choke to death. That was the whole point of the Monty Python in The Meaning of Life, when one of the guys came in and he was like 800 pounds, and he looks at the menu after he pukes on it and says, I want the lot. And they kept feeding him and feeding him and feeding him and feeding him and feeding him. He kept eating and eating and eating and eating. And they gave him one little tiny piece of meat and he exploded. Gluttony and that greed for the gluttonous, ravenous hunger for that greed was what that entire thing was about. And then he never stopped until he literally burst at the seams and exploded with, vomit all over everybody. And he was just his whole body was blown open. You could see his heart beating in his rib cage, and everybody was starting to throw up from that. And of course they left right then, but that was the whole moral of the story that they were trying to teach you in that dark comedy that was Monty Python, was that gluttony and that greed kills. Eventually the greed will eat you from the inside out. That was the whole purpose of that. And they were showing it to you in a physical way that doesn't actually happen, but people don't actually eat themselves to death like that and explode, but people do eat themselves to death. Gluttonous people, not just people eating food, but living in the tree of life and eating of the flesh. Greedy people, no matter how much money they have, it doesn't slake their lust. That was the whole purpose of the crew of the Black Pearl. And in the movies Pirates of the Caribbean was that they took them all. He was showing you how greedy they were when they did it. We took them all, and then they spent them on drink and women, and then nothing would slake their lust. They had that sanguine addiction to money, and that they realized that it was making them worse and worse, and that they were cursed. And then they had to go back and get all of it and return it to stop the curse. And that was what they were doing, even though they were still trying to do it in an evil way. And then they realized that they threw Bootstrap Bill overboard, and that he was now on the ship from Davy Jones' locker on the Flying Dutchman, and they couldn't repent, so they had to get his heir. They had to get his son, and that's when they thought that it was Elizabeth Swann. It turned out that it wasn't. It was Bootstrap's kid, William. And that was what the whole thing was about. And the only smart person was the one that everybody thought was stupid. Jack Sparrow. Everybody thought he was this drunk guy pirate. He was a moron. He was the smartest character in the entire endeavor. He was the only one that actually knew what was going on and how to fix the whole entire thing. And that was all played out in the first movie. And then that's why I love that Gillette was a character who was in the British military and eventually was in the military working with the India Trading Company. And he actually said at one point in one of the movies, do you think he makes this all up, or do you think he plans this all out, or he just makes it up as he goes along? He looked at Jack Sparrow and actually liked him and was kind of envious in some ways of his intelligence because nobody else saw it. And he saw that. And that's when he was like, do you think he just makes this up as he goes, or do you think he plans it all out? He was on to, I wonder how smart Jack Sparrow is when everyone thinks he's stupid. Because he would trip over his own feet or trip on something he was saying, but he was brilliant, but he wasn't a great orator. And so he couldn't get his point across, but he was super smart, far smarter than, and that's why I love that character. But to get the character, you have to assume that he starts out in service to self, but he's not really in service to self. That's why he ends up doing what he does. But he's also, you have to assume he's drunk on rum at all times, even when you don't see him drinking. To get his character, he's drunk. That's why he's always staggering and talking the way he is. He's on drugs, drunk, stoned out of his mind on alcohol 24 hours a day in that state. but he's super brilliant. And he's got plans with it. He's outsmarting everybody, playing all sides against each other, because he's still trying to be about himself and trying to get rich and be immortal and the whole nines. But he can't help, because in his heart, he's not evil. So he can't help but try and help people. And eventually just gives up on trying to be the bad guy and just tries. And that's how his character winds up in the end. He just gives up on trying to be out for himself and saves William Turner, so that William Turner will still be alive for his wife. And because he likes him and he likes her, and he actually feels for all of them. And more, because he could have easily become the captain of the Dutchman, but he didn't. And they don't even tell you why he didn't do it. But if you are paying attention to his character, you know that he's not really evil. He was just greedy and was living that. Once he got over that in himself and did the shadow work, he just tried to pretend so that other people would still see him as evil, but he really wasn't from that point on. And him doing the shadow work happened when he was in Davy Jones' locker. So if you watch all of the movies, once he went to the locker and had that experience, he made it back. That changed him. And you see that change in Jack Sparrow's character from that point on in all of the movies, that once he went into the locker and actually died and was in the Davy Jones locker in purgatory and then was rescued, then he never looked back. He never was evil anymore from that point on. He just needed the evil people to think he was. And he was still trying, but you don't see him like trying to steal and rape and pillage and do the things that he did. That you see him change as time goes on. Anyway, that was the moral of all those stories. I loved that, all of those. Okay, guys. So I love you guys. I'll see you guys next Friday, and I'll give you updates as soon as I get them. Like I said, the publisher said we got your copy of the approved, and this is the person who's going to be contacting you to start developing further. And so as soon as they contact me, or that person, as soon as he contacts me, then I will get that ball rolling and let you know about the timeline. And as soon as we get the website up and the pre-ordering, you guys will be the first to know about it. I'll be telling you about it, doing shows about it myself, promoting it. And then you'll see me shift gears into promoting that, but continuing to promote this message, because that's what it's about, right? But you'll see me starting to push the Law of One away and start moving into doing more of this. And that's why I've already started transitioning to doing less and less of the Law of One, but utilizing that to show you that it's still the same message. I'm using it as a transitional phase. There's that word again, transitioning, using that as a transitional phase to move, because if you haven't read them all, you should already be reading that. If you haven't been studying, you should be doing that. That's why my book will help you with that. And the books that I mentioned to you that I have in the past, that if you've been listening to me for the last few years, you know what I'm talking about. You should be reading that stuff. Not only that, but everything. Because everything, eventually you're going to wake up. And that's why I tell that story about the Sufi, the guru who was buying all the books. I did the same thing, buying every book I could buy and reading everything I could read. And then one day when I realized that there was nothing, I was always disappointed. I'll leave you guys with this. Every time I would read something, I was always, my whole life, because I thought when I was a boy, I didn't understand what being unveiled meant. You don't awake going, I'm unveiled, right? I just knew everything and thought everybody did, until I was told that's not normal. What you know, not everybody knows. And you can't tell people that. That was what I was told by my father. You can't tell people that, because they're not going to understand you until you get to a point. No one's going to ever really, truly understand you, no matter how old you get. But you're going to get to a point where people are going to accept what you have to say, and it's only going to be a small portion of the population. Right now, you say this as a little boy, and they're going to think that I'm brainwashing you into believing this, and they're going to take you from me. When you're teaching me as much as I'm teaching you, because he would ask me questions, and I would tell him answers. And he was like, how do you know this? Because I do. I just know it. So he would tell me what I needed to learn to make it in this place, and I would tell him things that he was just going, what? Right? But he was like, you can't just tell people this stuff when you're in kindergarten, first grade. You're not going to be able to tell people this until you're over 18, because then they can't force you to do anything. Then you could start telling people, but I found that it was still a very small population. Okay. So literally you have to realize that. And that's why I talk about that I bought all the books and I would be disappointed. I would read Aristotle and I'm like, he's not as intelligent as people think he is. I'm reading Socrates, right? I'm to this day not very impressed with the Dalai Lama. I've mentioned that, and those of you who have ever talked to me, you know that I have. I mentioned that I'm not very impressed with the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama answers questions in a way that is wrong for someone who is supposed to be the most awake mind on the earth. Specifically, when a little girl in the audience said, can a girl, be the Dalai Lama? And he did not try and empower her in any way and didn't see beyond the scope of sexism. He smiled and said, traditionally, it's a man. Fell back on, it's not my fault. I'm not making the decision. Traditionally, it has been a man. Left it at that. Did not go further and say, I don't know why. I am the Dalai Lama. Maybe that should change. Nope. That means that he believes in the tradition. That means he's not as awake as everyone thinks he is. Do you see? And nothing will change. Okay? So the Dalai Lama is not unveiled. People are impressed, like Eckhart Tolle was impressed by the Dalai Lama because he was with the Dalai Lama and someone asked him a question and he didn't know the answer to it. And the Dalai Lama said, I don't know. That's impressive because it shows the ability to overcome the ego. So as far as people are awake, that's an impressive feat. I agree with Eckhart Tolle at that point. And he said that the Dalai Lama said that more than once while he was with him. I'm okay with that. Okay? And you will hear me say that. I don't know the answer to that. But this is what I think. I don't believe I know the answer to everything. Because I believe in what Socrates did say, that the more you know, the more you realize that you don't know anything in the grand scheme of things. So I don't know every answer, but I can figure things out or take an educated guess. And if I don't know, like when someone will say to me, so if you're a know-it-all and you know everything, how would you fix this problem if somebody had this going on with their brain? I'm not a brain surgeon. I don't know the answer to that. I have a smartphone that I can just Google and find out what other scientists have said is the answer to that. So I have access to knowledge, and beyond that, I have access to the Akashic record, so I could tap into that and get the same response. Okay, but that's not me knowing it. So people think being unveiled means that you know everything about everything everywhere in the universe. No, you just have access when you look. I can look at things, but then I can tell you things that you would just have no reference to. So when somebody says, okay, so then how did the swath on Mars get there then? That was actually done physically in a war where there was a particle beam weapon. 90% of the population of this Earth is going to go, you just made that up. And you go, well, it actually happened here on Earth too. And they go, no, it didn't. Yeah, it did. The Grand Canyon. That happened through erosion forever. Weirdly, there is no other place on this planet where the same thing has occurred anywhere near that mile wide and mile deep chasm that runs for hundreds of miles anywhere else on the face of the earth. Not even anywhere on the face of the earth where it shows that it happened less than or half that. Okay. We get some that looks like it might when you see these valleys that come down to a river running through it. And some people will say, well, that was erosion that originally that river may have been really shallow. But there's nothing that shows when you go into those areas that are up the sides of the valley that shows, well, then a river actually ran through here at some point. That should be there. Just like if we dig down in the earth and we uncover it, you can look at the layers. Those layers should be there that would show river running through it at 100 feet up, and then at 90 feet up, and then 80 feet up, and then 70 feet up, and 60 feet up, and to go down like the Grand Canyon shows. Do you see? So for the Grand Canyon to work, it's the only place on the face of the earth. Well, it was because of the rocks there are all sandstone. There are many other places, including Egypt, where sandstone has been apparent. And why is it that the Nile has been running through sand and sandstone for 10,000 years and it's still just as shallow? as it was 10,000 years ago, and it's still running in the same place. And that hasn't shown signs of going further and further down at all. Well, because it floods and then it leaves, it would still have sediment that should be lower and lower and lower. Well, the same amount of water goes through there. That's not true, because we know that there were rivers that ran through, that came up to where the pyramids are now, and that ran underground for thousands of years. And when they know that, because when they find those viaducts now, they can see the erosion. So they can go in there and say, this viaduct has been a river that's been running underground for 10,000 years. Why is the Nile above ground not eroded the same way the one that's underground currently, that was above ground at one point, that got covered over? Why is it still there eroding underground? Because it's still running, but the one that didn't get covered over is still at the same height. And this one didn't get covered over and then go lower. It started going lower and lower and lower, and then eventually covered over because of the sand once the earth changed. I know I'm getting into too many details. But there is no other example on the face of the earth that would suggest what they're claiming happened here in the United States, going from in the Colorado River, the Snake River, which I've been to, that would show their theory is sound. Because if it happened that way in that place here in the United States for the Grand Canyon, it would have been happening somewhere else on this earth as well, above ground. And there would be complete evidence of that fact to show you many Grand Canyons in other places. And there's not, which suggests their theory is wrong. It happened another way. Has there been erosion there? Yes. Was it as wide and deep because a river was trickling up there a million years ago? It's the only place where that didn't change and the river stayed flowing in the exact same place no matter what has happened. An ice age didn't change the Grand Canyon, when we know that it changed the landscape of the entire northern hemisphere of the planet in that time period, but the Grand Canyon wasn't affected by it. How did that happen? And why is there no, if there was an ice age and it changed the landscape of everything else, then it should show that during the ice age, for the entire time that the Grand Canyon was froze over, there would not have been any erosion. So the erosion would have to change, like a tree ring would have to get thinner in times when there was less water. So because there was no water running anymore, because it was frozen over, because there was an ice age for more than 10,000 years, it should have stopped. And it should show at the bottom that there was this thin layer where it hasn't moved and it just started moving again, because there was a squelching of 10,000 years until the permafrost wore off. You don't hear anybody telling about that. Why? Because it doesn't exist. All right, guys. That's just one of the things that I could say, but you can't prove it. Although with the Grand Canyon here on Earth, you can prove it. But when I tell you about that and how the swath got up on Mars, which is a canyon that is wider, more than a mile wide and more than a mile deep, which is across the face of Mars, and we call it Mars Grand Canyon. It's bigger. All scientists said, well, that one started because of some sort of particle beam. It looks like something hit it, like a big giant lightning bolt crashed into it. So they know it was a particle beam, that it just won't admit that it was a particle beam weapon from a Death Star, say, that would be about the size of the Earth's moon. Coincidentally, won't get into that theory, but the Earth's moon was in fact a weapon of mass destruction that was orbiting a moon of Maldek, a planet that got destroyed because of an interstellar war. What? And that it was damaged and the engine doesn't work, and that it was towed in place when all the refugees came to Earth, because Earth was the only place that survived said war. Weirdly, that the Grand Canyon happens to go backwards in time 75,000 years, and the swath on Mars happens to go back in time in 75,000 years. And some people say the moon didn't exist more than 75,000 years ago, that there was another planet that was out there in the solar system that is now the Kuiper Belt. weirdly, that there are stories that those all changed at the exact same time, 75,000 years ago, and that there's stories telling of a time when there was a war of the gods that happened, and that people came here, Atlanteans, and were refugees on this earth from said war, and that all of those swaths happened at exactly that time of that war. Weirdly. But none of those existed and none of that happened. That was all made up afterwards. Oh, coincidentally, they were made up about 2,000 or 3,000 years ago when they made up all these religions, and they just so happened to be right that all of these events occurred at the same time 75,000 years ago. I'm sorry, that's too much of a coincidence for me. That all of those changes happened at the exact same time, and that some people say that's because we were told that it was a war that happened. And science goes, no, it was just a coincidence. They all happened around the same time, but it had nothing to do with anything on each other, even though the weaponry used was the exact same kind of weaponry that they were talking about Shiva having and Odin having and Marduk's grandma Tiamat having. And all of those religions are talking about wars between gods. Just those three. Having particle beam weapons. Wait, what? Never mind that now. That was a coincidence. They all must have taken their knowledge from the Mesopotamians when they made up the Viking religion and they made up the Egyptian religion and when they made up the other stuff. Yeah. Okay, so when did they get their scroll? That scroll and their ideology came from the Greeks. What? Look it up. And the Greeks said, well, we got it from the Egyptians. Well, it all goes back to the Egyptians made that shit up. The Egyptians go, no, that's not ours. That came from a group of people who were alive 75,000 years ago when the destruction happened. Okay? Just saying. And now we're finding proof that they existed, that there was a group of people that were on this earth. It was a global empire that lived here that disappeared 75,000 years ago. Just saying. All right, guys, I'll leave you with that. Play with that one and chew on that for a little bit. Okay. And I'll see you guys next Friday. This has been Orion Rising. I am your host, Leonard O'Neill. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good morrow, depending on where in the world you are tuning into the show.